Today, I'm going to be ranking every single mission in Grand Theft Auto 4. I'm going to start chronologically, explaining every mission's importance to the story and how much I personally liked every mission based on both story importance and how fun the gameplay is. I will finally be ranking all the missions in one big tier list at the end of the video. The Cousins Bellic. Niko Bellic is seen on a ship heading into Liberty City, likely illegally immigrating into America. One of Niko's friends on the ship then asks for help docking the ship, and during this, Niko tells him about the wealth his cousin Roman has gotten since moving to America. The ship docks in Liberty City, and Niko sees his cousin Roman heading down the dock to pick him up. Roman gets out of the car drunk and hugs Niko, saying that it's great to see him finally. Since Roman is drunk, Niko then has to drive the car home, and on the way home, Niko asks where Roman's supposed sports car is, and Roman says that it's in the shop. On the way to Roman's apartment, Roman tells Niko that the bridges in Liberty City have been closed down due to a terrorist threat, and is staying broker, the game's equivalent for Brooklyn, since he doesn't have a visa. They get to Roman's apartment where Niko asks Roman where his mansion is, realizing that Roman has lied about his life in America to Niko. Inside the apartment, Niko sees cockroaches and an extremely dirty apartment, realizing that most everything Roman told him was a lie. Roman also tells Niko about his taxi company, saying that the company will eventually get them to that mansion he was talking about, and leaves saying that he has to get the taxi that they drove back to the depot while talking on the phone to one of the people he owes money to. I really like this intro. It does a good job of introducing the player to Liberty City as Niko sees it. The diamonds that are a part of the entire game are also being shown smuggled into Liberty City, and you can also tell that Roman has been playing up the American dream to Niko, and that the American dream to him is the ability to be able to dream big, not actually living that life. You also learn that Niko has been running away from his problems, and that he doesn't want to tell Roman about the reasons why he went to America. Overall, it is a very good intro, but one that could have used gameplay to really make it interesting, as there's just not really that much to do in this first mission. It's your call. Niko arrives at Roman's taxi depot office, where he sees Roman trying some pickup lines on his girlfriend Mallory. Roman shows off Mallory, saying that not everything he said in his emails was a lie, and that Mallory is the woman that he's going to be marrying. Vlad, one of the men that Roman owes money to, comes in, and Niko stares at him until Vlad threatens to execute him before leaving again. Roman and Niko then leave the taxi depot to show Niko the city and for Roman to play in a card game. Roman then asks Niko to drive him to a hardware store that is a front for a backroom gambling racket. Roman is going to be gambling with money that he owes to Albanian loan sharks, and gives Niko his old cell phone to alert him if the loan sharks try to collect on that money. Eventually, these Albanian loan sharks show up, and Niko warns him, and then Roman has to sprint out through the back door so Niko can pick him up and bring him back to his office. On the way back to the depot, Roman tells Niko not to hurt the Albanians, as that will make them even more mad and want the money back even more. He eventually goes back to the office where the mission ends. This is a pretty weak mission. It really is just a pickup for Roman, and not much else to do as Niko besides get away from the loan sharks as the loan sharks start chasing you. And it does a good job of showing the differences between Niko and Roman, with Niko being kind of a man of action while Roman tries to play inside the system, and also how Roman is racking up gambling debts, which is a pretty big part of the story. Three's a crowd. Niko receives a text message from Roman asking him to hurry back to the depot as he needs help. Inside, Niko sees the Albanian thugs threatening Roman with a knife, so Niko has to break one of their arms and eventually gets them to leave the depot. Mallory calls Roman and asks him to pick her and her friend Michelle up from the subway station and take them to Michelle's apartment, but since Roman is busy, he asks Niko to do it. Niko then drives over to the subway station and picks Mallory and Michelle up, and on the way to Michelle's apartment, Mallory tells Niko that he should take Michelle on a date and also get some new clothes, as he looks like he just got off the boat from Europe. After dropping them off at Michelle's apartment, Niko calls Roman, who tells Niko to buy some new clothes from the Russian clothing shop in Hove Beach, and then Niko heads over there and buys some new clothes. In my opinion, this is a terrible mission. You really just get to talk to Mallory and Michelle a bit, but you don't really learn that much about either of them, besides Mallory being someone that kind of talks a lot and is really outgoing, and that Michelle is single. And while there is a nice cutscene at the beginning where you have Niko fighting off the Albanian thugs, and you can see that Niko is a man of action compared to Roman, you kind of learn that in the last couple of missions, and just the fact that Niko seems to be someone who's like willing to fight these people. I just think in general, it doesn't really work to push the story that much forward. And at the same time, the gameplay in this mission is absolutely terrible. So this mission, Three's a Crowd, has to go into F tier. Bleed Out. Nico heads over to Michelle's apartment for his first date, but before he can get there, Roman calls to ask him for help as the Albanian thugs have him trapped on the basketball courts in the Firefly projects. Nico heads over to the basketball courts where he has to fight off the two thugs to save Roman, and after beating up the two Albanians, they spot the other Albanian whose arm Nico broke in the last mission, who gets into his car, starting a chase sequence. The chase continues until an abandoned warehouse where the Albanian named Darden crashes his car, so Nico has to chase him up a set of stairs into the warehouse, starting a fight where Nico beats up Darden, who has a knife. Nico and Roman then head home with Roman being thankful, but thinking that Nico could piss some of the people off Roman owes money to. Nico shares a bit about his backstory with Bulgarin in this mission, which I think helps to round out his character a bit. This is also the first of many chase sequences in the entire game, and while this one isn't all that great, it's a lot more interesting than the first few missions in the game. I do really think steps it up in terms of that sense. It also does a good job of illustrating how Nico is going to change Roman's life a lot as he's going to fight back against the people harassing Roman, and you do get a little bit more about Nico's backstory and kind of can understand him a little bit. First date. Nico then returns to Michelle's apartment where he notices that almost all the things in her apartment are new items just bought from the store and still have tags on them, which Michelle deflects by saying that she's a clean freak. They then head out to the fun fair, which Nico calls it, or carnival on Firefly Island, before realizing that it's closed because it's turning into a Las Venturas style theme park, and instead head over to the bowling alley. Nico then loses to Michelle in bowling, and they then head home, with Michelle saying that she had a great time and wants to go on more dates with Nico. Bowling is pretty fun, and Rockstar does a great job of foreshadowing Michelle, as she literally doesn't say anything about herself the entire time, kind of just deflecting anytime that Nico wants to ask about her past life or where she's from, or any of these other backstory things that would go to kind of flesh out Michelle as a character, and mainly ask questions about Nico and his criminal dealings, which is kind of a common thing through Michelle the entire game. She kind of just only asks Nico about the bad things he's doing and doesn't say anything about herself. Bowling at least is pretty fun. I think it is my favorite minigame in GTA 4, which does make this mission okay, even if it is just a tutorial for meeting up with your friends or girlfriends in the game. And for that, I'm going to give this mission a C tier. Easy fare. Nico enters Roman's cab depot where Vlad and Mallory are talking. Vlad and Nico get into an argument after Vlad asks Nico to get him a cup of coffee, and then Roman walks in and Vlad suggests that Roman and Nico do him a few favors to pay off Roman's debt to him. Vlad then leaves and Roman asks Nico to pick up one of his regular customers, Jermaine, from his apartment. Nico heads over to Jermaine's apartment and picks him up. Jermaine then asks Nico to take him to Masterson Street, where Jermaine says that there's a shipment of stolen auto parts in the lockup that he intends to resell, and he needs Nico's help to bring them back to his apartment. They get to the lockup where Jermaine notices the door is open and two cops roll up, so Jermaine jumps back in the car and tells Nico to drive out of there. Nico quickly escapes the area and gets Jermaine back to his apartment. This is such a boring mission. You literally just pick up Jermaine to go to the lockup and then immediately get there and then have to run from the cops and like escape the cops. It's basically just a development mission on how to escape the cops and have like the whole cops chasing after you thing. So I guess it kind of works in that sense, but it really is just a tutorial mission, and I don't like these, and there's not really anything developed in this mission besides Vlad and Mallory's relationship and then learning a little bit more about Nico's past, but in general it's just not a good mission and deserves a D tier. Bull in a china shop. Vlad calls Nico, telling him that he needs some things completed in exchange for Roman's debt, so Nico meets Vlad at a bar. Nico and Vlad trade insults before Vlad asks Nico to deal with a china shop owner who owes Vlad protection money. Vlad asks Nico not to hurt the man, but just to get the money back because he needs the money back but he doesn't want the guy dead. Nico then heads over to the china shop where he finds that the door is locked and that the owner is refusing to pay up. Nico can then find a brick around the corner and use it to intimidate the store owner, getting him to pay up, and also can break the windows to get the owner to pay up. After breaking the windows, the owner agrees to pay out of fear. Nico then takes the money back to Vlad, who reveals that the shop owner was getting the items for extremely cheap back east and that the items are made illegally. While it is interesting to finally be involved with Vlad's business, this mission is pretty one note. You kind of just meet Vlad, smash up the store, and then go back to Vlad. It really is just a tutorial mission to set up Nico working for Vlad and shows how bad of a person Vlad is, but just in general, it just is not that interesting of a mission, and I think can only really get D tier. Hung out to dry. Nico returns to the bar where he overhears Vlad talking to Mallory on the phone and promptly hangs up when he sees Nico. Vlad asks Nico to remind another borrower, a laundromat's owner, to pay his loan. Nico then drives around the block to the laundromat, where the owner scurries out the back and flees away in a van, starting a chase where Nico has to ram his car into the van to get the van to stop. The laundromat man eventually stops and says that he will give Vlad the money soon. The chase sequence in this mission is a little bit better than some of the other Vlad missions, but it still just feels really boring and not like much is going on. I mean, this mission I feel like was even shorter than the last mission, and there's just not that much going on in this mission to like make it an interesting mission. Nico is really just an errand boy for everyone around him, and it makes the missions feel one note and not like they're building too much, where it's like, this is a very similar mission to the last one. You're just going out to get the loan, and it does make sense because you want to build up these characters little by little and then have these bigger missions at the end, but it does just make the individual missions a little bit worse. Clean getaway. Nico enters the bar where he finds Vlad and his friends are extremely drunk. After seeing Nico, Vlad suggests they go for a walk to his car. On the way to Vlad's car, Vlad curses and shouts at people in his way before they get to the car so Vlad can do a line that he got from Mikhail Faustin. Vlad then orders Nico to steal a car parked in Dukes which belongs to one of his debtors. Nico then asks if they're driving there together, and Vlad tells him that peasants need to take the subway and that he's going on a date, which is kind of suggested to be Mallory. Nico then hops on the subway and heads to Dukes, where he beats up two guys outside the car and takes the car, calling Vlad, telling him the car is dirty. Nico then washes the car after Vlad tells him where the nearest car wash is and drives it back to Vlad's lockup. I love the way that Vlad is just shown to be such a bad person in this mission, having no regard for other people and forcing Nico to take the subway instead of driving him. Like, this is the perfect way to get the player introduced to the subway without it being like, oh, you have to use the subway for this mission. I mean, you do have to use the subway for the mission, but there is a specific reason why you're using the subway over taking a car to this part. And then the mission itself is just a pretty standard taking of the guy's car, but I do think having Vlad more involved in this mission makes it a lot better with the use of the subway and then beating up the guys who own the car. It makes the mission feel a little bit more involved than some of the other missions with Vlad. Jamaican Heat. Roman is busy taking calls as Nico walks in, and after they both talk about Nico's past in the army, Nico tries to change the conversation, saying that he'll say more about his past in the army when Roman has time. Roman then asks Nico to pick up one of his regular customers, Little Jacob. Nico goes over to Little Jacob and he picks him up there, and he drives him over to a meeting that he has set up where Jacob gives Nico a gun to protect him if the deal goes bad. 3 gang members show up instead of just one like expected, and they start firing on Jacob, forcing Nico to take them out. Another gang member shows up on the roof as well on the building next to Nico, forcing Nico to take him down as well. Nico and Jacob then escape the area with Little Jacob saying that he was impressed with Nico's shooting skills, so he gives Nico his number so they can work together later on, and then Nico drives Little Jacob back to the cafe. This is a pretty solid mission. It's nice to finally have a gunfight in the game. I feel like this is probably the longest time in any GTA game where it takes to have a gunfight in the game, and it's a good introduction to Little Jacob, who is one of my favorite characters in the entire game. He's just such a unique character, and especially because he speaks in Jamaican patois, I think is what it's called. It just makes him such a unique character, and I really love this introduction to him. It is a pretty short mission though, and it's really not that all unique, but it is the first gunfight in the entire game. It does just add a little bit more action to this part on the game, but it would have been nice to have a little bit more backstory on Jacob or Nico as well during this mission, instead of it just being kind of a generic mission. Ivan the Not So Terrible. Nico returns to the bar, and Vlad tells Nico that a man named Ivan has upset Mikhail Faustin, his boss, and wants Nico to take him out. Vlad explains to Nico that he told Ivan to rob Roman's cab depot for protection money and wants Nico to shoot Ivan for this so that Nico can then claim self-defense. Nico drives to Roman's cab depot where he finds Ivan leaving the depot in his car, starting a car chase. Nico chases him throughout the city, with the chase eventually ending at a construction site. Ivan climbs up the construction site and Nico follows him up a crane where Ivan then jumps over to the roof of another building. Nico chases him to the end of the buildings where Ivan falls off the building, holding on to the edge of the building. Nico then has the choice to either save him or let Ivan fall. Nico then saves Ivan, and Nico finally refuses to do any more work for Vlad. This is the first mission where you can make a decision, and I think saving Ivan is the decision that makes the most sense, as Nico really doesn't like Vlad already, and Vlad also has a great line at the end of the mission about Mallory, kind of setting up their confrontation. I also really like the way that the mission immediately starts when you get to Romans. It starts the chase immediately. It just gives a little bit more tension and kind of just keeps this like adrenaline rushing, rather than like, oh, you go there and then he immediately like escapes out the back and you have to get into the car. It's like the car, you're already in the car, so you can kind of start the car chase immediately. And the chase is also solid while unspectacular. It just is a pretty good chase throughout the city, even if Rockstar does like force it to go to the construction site, so it's like forced to go there and then you can have the choice there. But overall, I think it's a really good way of like introducing the choices throughout the game, and I do think it's a great mission, so it definitely gets A tier. Uncle Vlad. Nico goes to the cab depot where he finds Roman drinking because he has found out that Mallory was having an affair with Vlad, which Nico says that he suspected was happening. Roman then crashes out on Nico, saying that he should have told Roman and that Nico is a bad cousin for not telling him. Nico responds by telling Roman he thought they had an agreement for their open relationship, but Roman says that Vlad was never a part of the agreement, so Nico says he'll take matters into his own hands and talk to Vlad to stop the affair. Since Roman doesn't want anything bad to happen, he goes with Nico to stop him from doing anything crazy. Nico and Roman then head over to the bar where they confront Vlad, and Vlad escapes out of the back door of the bar, leaving Nico to fight off his two goons. Nico quickly takes down the goons, seeing Vlad escape in his car out the back, starting a chase sequence. Vlad eventually crashes his car near the river and tries to escape on foot. Nico then confronts Vlad over the affair, where Vlad threatens Nico, saying that he and Roman are both small-time players in Liberty City, and that if he shoots Vlad, Nico will be throwing away both Nico and Roman's lives away, as Vlad's friends will hunt them down. Nico then executes Vlad with a handgun, and Roman starts panicking, thinking that they will be hunted down by Vlad's more powerful friends, but Nico tries to tell him everything will be alright. Nico then reveals to Roman that he came to Liberty City to hunt down one of the two people he thought might have betrayed his unit during the war, as he figured out that one of them lived in Liberty City. You finally get to finish off Vlad during this mission and understand who betrayed Nico and basically why he's in America after finding out the people involved were in Liberty City. This is a pretty great mission, and even though the mission itself isn't really that great gameplay wise, you get to learn so much about Nico and why he's in Liberty City and see the differences in Roman and his outlooks, as Nico gets to go to directly confront and face the problems, while Roman kind of tries to push them as far away for another time. The mission also does a great job of foreshadowing Nico's involvement in Liberty City and the people who will come after Nico and Roman since they got rid of Vlad here. And it's just such a satisfying mission since Vlad was extremely annoying, and it's a great mission that kind of pushes the plot forward a ton and reveals a lot about Nico. It really is the quintessential mission at the beginning of the game that you kind of learn a lot about your characters from. So because of that, it's going to be for sure an S tier mission. Crime and punishment. Nico receives a frantic phone call from Roman telling him that he's hiding in a dumpster because he doesn't want to be hurt by Vlad's friends. Nico tries to tell him that the Russians never liked Vlad before one of their goons comes up from behind Nico and knocks him out. He then forces Roman out of the dumpster and says that Faustian wants a chat with them. When Nico wakes up, he's tied up in a chair in Faustian's basement, and Dmitry Raskolov, Faustian's partner, slaps him to wake him up. Dmitry shows Nico that they had to gag Roman because he was screaming the entire time, and the other goon named Andre asks Nico who he works for. Faustian then comes down into the basement and tells him to shut up since his wife is upstairs watching TV and asks who Nico is. Nico says that he's Roman's cousin, and Faustian calls Andre an idiot because he got no information for Nico for all the noise. Faustian asks Nico if he thinks it's okay to kill his employees, and Nico says, if he's an asshole, yes. Faustian then shoots Andre in the head and says, I agree, agreeing with Nico that Vlad was an idiot and that he only kept him around because he was having an affair with Vlad's sister. Faustian spares Nico so that Nico can start working for him instead, and Dimitri tells Nico that he has to steal a van of TV sets that they want to sell. Nico then asks for Roman's gag to be removed, and Dimitri unties it before Roman starts screaming for help, and Faustian shoots Roman in the stomach. Dimitri then threatens Nico to get the TVs as soon as possible, or they will have to hurt Roman more, potentially even making him die. Nico then has to get a police car, which can be found down the street, as the police will respond to an incident on the same street, and then you can just go down and take the police car there. After stealing the car, Nico calls Dimitri and asks where the van is, and Dimitri says around South Broker, so there are 3 vans marked on the map and one of them has the TVs. Eventually, Nico will pull over the right truck, and after taking out the occupant, he drives the van to a lockup. It's nice to finally get involved in Faustian and Liberty City's crime scene, but I feel like the mission itself isn't great. You really just go around and try to find the TVs by pulling the vans over. The initial cutscene meeting Faustian and him shooting one of his goons is pretty amazing, but I do just think the mission itself, of just going around and finding TVs, it really just takes the adrenaline down so much, where it's you have this great cutscene at the beginning that is really tense, and then you just go around driving around and just trying to find a specific van that has TVs and then taking it and bringing it to the lockup. It just seems like such a weird mishmash of a mission with something that's so tense, because Roman and Nico are literally tied up in the basement of one of their biggest enemies, and then you have this regular mission that doesn't really feel that tense, where you're driving around the city and then having to find a van to take it over and then bring it back to a lockup. It just is kind of this weird mismatch of 2 different missions, or a mission and a cutscene that just don't really make sense together, and it just kind of hurts the overall mission. So I think this one's gonna get a B tier. Concrete Jungle. Nico meets little Jacob at Jacob's apartment, where Jacob tells Nico to drive him to a deal he set up. Since Jacob is buying from a new source, he's unsure if it's a setup and asks Nico for protection just in case the deal goes bad. Nico covers the back of the building where the deal is going down, and Jacob calls Nico saying that the deal went bad and to take out the dealers who are trying to escape out of the back. Nico then picks up Jacob, who says that they need to go to the people who set up the deal and take revenge on them, so Nico and Jacob then drive into their house, break in, and shoot all the inhabitants. Nico then drives Jacob back to that cafe. This mission is pretty good. I think a mission with Jacob is always great because he's such an interesting character. I do like the progression of the mission from Jacob and you first shooting the guys at the deal to then having a car chase and finally ending with confronting the dudes in their house. It's not like it adds on that much story-wise besides Nico getting more acquainted with little Jacob, but I do think it's one of the better missions so far gameplay-wise. Do you have protection? Nico meets Dimitri and Faustian at Faustian's house, where they are arguing over Faustian getting out of control and basically wanting to shoot anyone who is against him. Dimitri and Nico then head out to get their protection money from an adult film producer who hasn't paid them yet. They head over to the shop where Dimitri says that Faustian wants the man dead, but Dimitri says they should keep him alive to earn more money from him. They arrive at the store, and inside they find 3 men who don't want to give their share up yet before Nico shoots one of the actors in the leg, which intimidates the men enough to give up their share of protection money. Nico and Dimitri then head over to a gun shop where Nico gets an SMG that is free because it's put on Faustian's credit card, and finally drives Dimitri back to Faustian's, where he tells Nico to meet him and Faustian at the club. It's a pretty good mission. It's nice to go with Dimitri and kind of extort the people who need to pay him protection money. I feel like this is the mission where it feels the most like you're actually someone who's going out to extort people. You compare it to Bull in a China shop or a lot of those other missions, they don't really feel like you're going out there to extort them. There is a nice tense cut scene. There's actually things going on where it's oh, actually it feels nice and tense in there when you're extorting the money. And it's great to finally get a bit of insight into Faustian and Dimitri's dynamic and how Dimitri uses Faustian to get what he wants. You can also see Rockstar foreshadowing Dimitri and how he's kind of the mastermind spearheading Faustian's operation. It also finally introduces you to the gun shops, which opens up Liberty City a lot. Final destination. Nico meets Mikhail and Dimitri at the club in Broker, where Mikhail tells Nico to take out Lenny Petrovich, who he thinks is a rat. Dimitri tries to stop Mikhail, saying that he's dating his cousin, but Mikhail is really stuck on taking out Petrovich. Nico then heads over to Bohan to find Petrovich, where Mikhail tells Nico that Petrovich is at a train station in Bohan. Nico eventually gets to that train station where he confronts Lenny, calls him a rat, and then just takes him out on the platform. After the mission, Nico then gets a call from Dimitri, who says that this will cause major problems as Petrovich's father is one of the most powerful men in Liberty City. This mission is really good at amping up the stakes of the plot with Faustian and Dimitri, revealing that Kenny's father is as important or even more important than Faustian himself and involved in big things in Liberty City, but the mission itself is just a pretty normal assassination mission that introduces the player to Bohan. The mission could have used at least a little bit more gameplay instead of it ending as soon as you shoot Kenny, and I just think it could have been used as like a little bit longer of a mission rather than just being this, short assassination mission where you shoot Kenny and then it's all over, because this is a really important mission in the context of the game and the plot. Shadow. Nico heads over to Little Jacob's apartment, where he gets surprised inside by Badman, who tackles him and threatens him with a box cutter. Jacob then calls off Badman and says that Nico is a friend of his. Badman then asks Nico to follow a dealer who is dealing on their turf without giving a cut to them, finding the supplier, and then taking the supplier out. Nico drives over to where the dealer is and just follows the dealer all the way to the supplier's apartment. Nico then shoots the dealer and the suppliers in their apartment and then calls Jacob to let him know that he took out the dealer. This mission is pretty boring while having a pretty funny cutscene with Badman and Little Jacob at the beginning. Tracking missions are just some of the worst missions in GTA games, and the ending of this mission is just taking out the dealers without much of a confrontation. In general, there's just not that much going on, and I feel like it's just such a slop and just adding in mission to kind of pad out the runtime instead of really adding that much to any of the characters here. Logging on. Nico enters Roman's office and meets Brucey, who is a friend of Roman's. Roman says that he met Brucey in an online chat room and wants to email Nico, so he persuades Nico to get online after calling him a Luddite. Nico then heads over to a twat internet cafe, logging on the computer, and then responds to an email which creates an account for him. This has got to be the worst mission in the entire game. It literally is exclusively a tutorial mission to get logged onto the internet as a mission. I think it would have been a lot better to stitch this onto another mission where you actually have to use the internet and maybe have an assassination. Like, there are a lot of other missions that use the internet, and it could have been better to just have Nico log on during one of those missions instead of having a whole new mission to log onto the internet that just doesn't do anything and just has one cutscene with Brucey in it. And at least you do get to meet Brucey in this mission, who kind of becomes an important character, but I feel like he has to be one of the least important characters in the game storyline, and this is just a terrible excuse for a mission. No love lost. Nico goes to Faustian's mansion, where Faustian orders Nico to take out the Lost MC biker Jason Michaels, who has been going on dates with Mikhail's daughter, Anna. Mikhail tells Nico that the two will probably be found around the amusement park in Firefly Island. Nico then finds Jason and Anna in Firefly Island, where he tells Jason to stay away from Anna before Jason says that the Lost MC will beat up Nico before leaving on his motorcycle. Nico then hops on a nearby motorcycle, which starts a motorcycle chase. Jason eventually links up with other members of the Lost MC, which starts a gunfight where Nico has to take them all out. This mission does a good job of showing how erratic Faustian is, literally asking Nico to take out his daughter's boyfriend just because he doesn't want her to be a slut. It also teases how Dimitri will backstab Faustian and Nico because he's doing his own thing instead of being with them during this mission. The mission is also pretty boring, just with a generic chase down and then having to take out the rest of the members of the biker gang. The chase also sucks in my opinion just because they force you onto a bike instead of allowing you to chase in a car, which doesn't make a ton of sense because the chase just goes down regular streets and you wouldn't really need the bike in general. So I don't think this is a good mission. I think this one deserves a D tier. Rigged to blow. Nico heads over to Faustian's house where his wife Elena opens the door and invites him in for tea. She offers him tea that's served from a Russian tea dispenser that Faustian has hidden away because he says it makes his family look like barbarians because it reminds them of the old country. Elena tells Nico about her old life with Faustian, saying that he used to be happy and not have a short temper, but one day everything changed and he became the angry man he is in the game. Nico then tells Elena about his life during the war and says that he started to do bad things during the war and continued to do them afterwards, thinking nothing of them. After seeing the horrors of the war, he smuggled and sold people and thought nothing about how it changed him and how it changed his soul. Elena asks Nico if he's worried about his soul, where Nico recounts a story of seeing 50 children in a village with their throats cut and their hands chopped off, where he realized the soldier there didn't have a soul. Faustian and Dimitri then burst in, and Faustian throws the tea dispenser off the table, yelling at Elena for bringing it out, causing her to leave. Dimitri and Faustian then argue over the different ways of going about their business, with Faustian saying that people need to be taught lessons, while Dimitri just wants to make money. Dimitri tells Faustian to calm down so they won't get into bigger trouble, and he tells Dimitri to get out, before asking Nico to pick up a truck. Nico then gets into the truck, where Faustian reveals the truck is rigged with a bomb and tells Nico to drive it to a garage in Bohan. Nico gets to the location where he arms the bomb before running away while it explodes. Nico then calls Faustian, saying that he won't do any more work like this because he was risking his life by being in the truck, especially as it was rigged to blow, before Faustian says that Nico is a coward, just like Dimitri. This is one of the best starting cutscenes. Talking to Faustian's wife, you can see Nico finally open up for the first time as he seems to empathize with her, as Faustian seems to have a worse version of Nico's condition of kind of not caring about killing people. Faustian and Dimitri come back, and you can see that Faustian has kind of given up on listening to other people in his own life, seeming uninterested with the people around him. Dimitri also clearly seems like he knows something more, trying to get Faustian not to rock the boat anymore or cause any more trouble because he knows Faustian is out of the picture by this point. The set piece of the garage blowing up is amazing too, but I think the overall mission isn't that great because you have this entire time where you're just like driving the truck around and you're just like trying not to hit into anything. I'm like, that just makes it so uninteresting, but it is still a great mission in general. The Master and the Molotov. Nico meets Dimitri in Firefly Island, where Dimitri explains that the Petrovich family are threatening to whack Dimitri if he doesn't take out Faustian. Nico is then sent by Dimitri to take out Faustian because Faustian's recklessness is getting out of control, and explains that Dimitri was able to negotiate with Petrovich so that only Faustian would be taken out because he told Petrovich that Nico was just a hired gun. Nico heads over to Faustian's club, where he confronts Faustian, who sends some of his goons to slow Nico down while he escapes out of the back of the club. Nico quickly takes out all the thugs, and then Nico follows Faustian, climbing up the stairs at the end of the alleyway to confront Faustian, who is waiting for Nico at the roof of the club. On the roof, Faustian warns Nico that Dimitri will betray him as America has made him greedy. Nico ignores this and then eventually executes Faustian, who falls off the roof to his death. After Faustian's death, Nico talks to Dimitri to inform him, and Nico is told by Dimitri that he did the right thing and that Dimitri will talk to Kenny Petrovich to keep Nico out from dying. You finally get to take out Faustian, and it's done in a great way, confronting him at his club, the one thing he really cares about, and taking him down there. Faustian also has an amazing monologue about how Dimitri will eventually betray Nico, as all he cares about is money and not the people who work with him. In general, I do think this is a great conclusion to Faustian's arc, but it would have been a little bit better if the mission was a little bit tougher. Like, you just kind of go to the club and it's super easy to get to Faustian, but I think that's kind of the point, as Faustian feels like he's given up on life by this point because everyone is coming after him, and even if Nico didn't take him out, someone eventually would. But it still is an amazing mission and deserves an A tier. Search and delete. Nikki meets Brucey at his garage, where Brucey asks Nico to eliminate Lyle Rivas over an unpaid debt. Following Brucey's suggestion, Nico uses a police computer to track down Rivas to his apartment in Rotterdam Hill Broker. When Nico eventually arrives and confronts him, Rivas then jumps out a window and flees away in his car, so then Nico has to go and chase after him and eventually eliminate him. Nico then phones Brucey to inform him that the job is done, and Brucey thanks him. This is the first real introduction to Brucey as a friend and someone who works with Nico, and he's such a unique character, likely being in the closet and being a steroid junkie. The overall mission is pretty good as well, with taking the police car from the policeman and starting a small chase in that side. and then getting introduced to the police computer, and then finally having to chase down Lyle Rivas, which in my playthrough ended up with his car being blown up at the airport, which I thought was one of the most insane things in the entire game. Like, they just go to the airport and the car blows up and not a single person cared at all. Russian Revolution. Dmitri calls Nico and they agree to meet at a warehouse in East Hook to collect the payment for Faustian's assassination, and then little Jacob calls Nico to say that he's a little suspicious of Dimitri's motives and insists as coming along as backup just in case Dmitri betrays Nico here. Nico then meets Jacob outside, leaving him to keep watch by the entrance while Nico heads in alone because Dmitri said to come out alone. Inside, he discovers Dmitri alongside Ray Bulgarin, a human trafficker Nico worked for back in Eastern Europe, and Nico tries to say that he wasn't the reason that one of Bulgarin's trafficking jobs went poorly, but Bulgarin ignores him and orders his death if he doesn't have the money to repay his debts. Nico then has to fight through the warehouse and take down all of Bulgarin and Dimitri's goons while Jacob rushes in to help Nico. During the ensuing shootout, Dmitri and Bulgarin manage to escape easily. Bulgarin basically always escapes before the shootout. That's like a common thing that Nico says about Bulgarin. And Nico and Jacob then fight their way through the warehouse, only to find, once they get almost outside of it, the LCPD waiting for them right outside. Nico then manages to hop in a car on the scene, get Jacob, and escape before dropping Jacob off back at his cafe, where they swear to get the revenge on Dmitri the next time they see him, and Nico calls Roman to tell him about Dimitri's betrayal. I really love the way this mission starts with Dmitri just seemingly wanting to give Nico his money, but then little Jacob calling and telling Nico that he has to come as well. The meeting with Dmitri is great, with him revealing that he betrayed you and is now working with Bulgarin, one of the men from Nico's past in the Mediterranean, to take Nico out as well. The gunfight in the warehouse isn't amazing, it is pretty generic, but the way this mission holds in the story, weaving new characters in Nico's life with people from his past, like having Jacob there to fight against Dmitri and to fight against Bulgarin as well. It just kind of works well and makes it an extremely important mission for the story and Nico's character arc. Easy as can be. Brucey wants Nico to steal Lyle Rivas' car. When Nico asks if there are any risks, Brucey says, nah, easy as can be. Nico heads over to where Brucey said the car would be to find Lyle's car in a nearby lot. Nico then gets into Lyle's car, and then Lyle's friends start shooting at the car, and then Nico has to eventually evade them and bring Lyle's car back to Brucey's lockup. This is a really boring mission. It is just a kind of generic take the car back mission and then having to shoot bad guys on the way back to Brucey. You don't really get to learn that much about anyone's character. I mean, of course you get to learn a little bit more about Brucey because this is a mission by him, but it's not really like much goes on in this mission. It is just a generic take back the car mission, but it's like not like there's any lore to that besides, oh, you're taking back Lyle Rivas' car, who you just shot in the last mission with Brucey. Roman's sorrow. Nico calls Roman, who asks Nico to meet him in an alleyway in East Island City. Nico then arrives where he hears Roman banging and calling for help from the inside of his trunk. Nico then opens the trunk and Roman is coming out gasping for air and coming out of the car, saying that he got paranoid after receiving a lot of random phone calls from people from numbers that he didn't know and locked himself in the back of the trunk of the taxi. Nico then reveals that Dmitri betrayed him and is now working with Ray Bulgarin. Roman says that they should keep a low profile for the time being since Nico has caused so much strife, and calls Mallory to see if she can find a place for them to stay in Bohan. They then head over to Roman's apartment, and on the way to the apartment, Roman tells Nico that he dreamt the night before that he and Mallory were married and owned a tavern. He also mentions that Nico was engaged in the dream to a beautiful woman after Nico says that he wouldn't settle down at the moment. Nico and Roman then arrive at the apartment building to see it going up in flames. Roman really wants to get back into the apartment to pick up something important he left inside, but Nico has to stop him, and they head over to Roman's cab depot, which they see is also burned down. They then head over to Bohan, where Mallory has found a place where they can stay at, and on the way, Roman berates Nico, saying that it was such a hard time to start his life in Liberty City, and they'd just gotten to a point where things were starting to get good before Nico ruined it for the both of them. Nico tells a story about their life in Eastern Europe, where they found a bottle of vodka in a destroyed bar and drank it together before Mallory calls Roman to tell them where to go. Roman then tells Nico that he had bought a wedding ring for Mallory, and that was a special item that he left in the apartment, and that's why he wanted to go back into the apartment to go get it. Nico and Roman then arrive in their new apartment in Bohan, where Mallory meets them and tells Nico to visit the community center where she works so she can introduce him to her friends. This is a great turning point for the story as Nico realizes that he's screwed Roman's life up in Liberty City, and even though he's helped out Roman in a lot of different ways, he's ruined the few things that Roman actually enjoyed doing and building in Liberty City, especially the cab depot. Roman's life in Liberty City had literally gone up in flames, and Nico and Roman have to make the best out of the ashes to get Roman's life back, because Nico is just doing this to help out Roman. Nico finally realizes that him being a man of action has actually hurt Roman's life more than it helped him, as it got him and Roman into deeper trouble with the people that Roman was in debt to. The beginning of the game also showed that Roman was finally happy with his life and what he built with the cab depot, and trying to eventually propose in Mallory, trying to turn his life around in a good aspect and maybe stop gambling as much. And it's just an amazing reset and change for the game, as Nico and Roman have to start back from square zero and get back to what they used to have. They go from a good place to a place that they're even rock bottom, and now they have to get back to even just what they used to have, not even to an even better place. Even though there isn't any gameplay during this mission, it's amazing because of what it reveals about the characters, especially how much it kind of opens up Roman and Nico's past lives, and it also does a good job of showing how Roman's life has been changed by allowing Nico to stay with him in America. So this is easily an S tier mission. Escuela of the Streets. Nico meets Mallory at the community center in Bohan, where he sees Manny Escuela and his cameraman shooting a TV show before Mallory goes over to Manny and introduces Nico to him. Manny tells Nico about his mission, which is cleaning the streets, which he explains is taking out the local dealers in the area. They then try to put Nico on camera, so Nico then destroys the camera, which makes Manny a little bit angry at Nico, reasonably so. So Manny offers Nico money to clean the streets instead, which Nico agrees to. Nico then heads over to the dealer's place, following a dealer to a warehouse where they're then meeting up and distributing stuff, where he's then meeting other dealers. Nico finds his way into the warehouse through a side window, where he then cleans out all the dealers in the warehouse, and while leaving the warehouse, Manny starts shooting his show, saying that gang violence erupted in the area and that all the dealers were cleaned out. The introduction to Manny is great, with him being this television guy, getting people off the streets and making money that way, and Nico immediately breaking his camera when they try to put him on TV. It's an okay mission, but the shootout in the warehouse is pretty generic and boring, and while the making of the TV show with Manny is somewhat interesting, the mission itself doesn't really go into his character that much, so this one is going to be a C tier mission. Street Sweeper. Nico returns to Bohan Community Center, where he sees Manny recording a clip with police officer Francis McCreary. In keeping with his promise to the officer to clean up the streets of South Bohan, he sends Nico to eliminate a group of thugs in a garage. Nico then goes over to the garage and he just eliminates the thugs easily. This has got to be one of the weirdest missions in the entire game, because there's just not really much going on. Like, yeah, you meet Francis McCreary, which does start Nico's like movement into that side of the game and like working with the police and all that, but I just think this mission is pretty boring, and it's really just a generic assassination mission that doesn't have any actual like plot devices. And even with Manny, I just think in general he's a pretty underdeveloped character, which makes these assassinations even less interesting. Luck of the Irish. Nico meets Elizabetta Torres through a phone call from Mallory and heads over to her apartment. Elizabetta says she'll pay Nico to keep watch over a deal involving Patrick McCreary that she's worried about. Elizabetta is a big dealer in the area and probably the kingpin of Bohan. Nico then heads over to a tenement across the street from the deal and gets a sniper rifle from the roof. During the deal, it seemed like the people that Packy was trying to sell to had a disagreement with him, and then they started a gunfight trying to take out Packy. Nico then has to clear the rest of the enemies out, including one who gets into kind of like a hand-to-hand fight with Packy. Nico then calls Elizabetta to let her know that Packy's okay, and that the deal, even though it didn't go down well, you know, Packy is all alive and they are all safe. Nico finally meets Packy and Elizabetta in this mission in Bohan, introducing Nico to the McCrearys on the other side of the family, but this is just a pretty generic mission. You really just protect Packy from the dealers, and it reminds me of a lot of the earlier missions with Little Jacob and Broker, which does make sense because he's basically at that same spot in the game as Nico has gone down to square zero. Blow your cover. During a party in her apartment, Elizabetta introduces Johnny, a biker from the Lost MC, to Nico and says that Johnny is sitting on a big pile of H that he's trying to sell. Elizabetta has found a buyer for the H, but she doesn't trust them, so she asks Nico to serve as extra protection along with Playboy X, another member at the party here, and also another like gang member. Nico and Playboy then drive to an abandoned apartment building in Broker where the deal breaks down as they reveal that they are undercover LCPD officers, which starts a shootout in the building. A news team then storms the building as well, and Johnny heads for the first floor while Nico and Playboy try to escape out of the roof. Nico and Playboy then have to fight off the noose agents on the roof and then head down a fire escape to get to the street. Nico then drives Playboy back to his penthouse in Algonquin, which unlocks Algonquin to the player, which is at least a pretty nice thing about this mission. This mission does a good job of introducing Nico to both Playboy and Johnny, both of who are relatively important during this story. You also get a bit of foreshadowing about Dwayne and how he's been in jail for a long time and how he's going to come out pretty soon. The mission also does a great job of psyching you out about expecting the deal to go down before it's revealed to be a bust by the police, and then it's just a huge shootout. The shootout leaving the apartment isn't great, but it is at least kind of fun shooting out all the SWAT officers in the tight apartment stairways. Out of the closet, Brucey wants Nico to take out Tom Rivas, the cousin of Lyle Rivas, because he hasn't repaid his debt. Rivas is in hiding but can be found on the website Love Meet and is actually a homosexual, so Brucey asks Nico to match with him on the website and take him out on a date before taking him out on that date. Nico then heads to an internet cafe to set up a date with Rivas and swipe right on the website Love Meet. A few days later, Rivas will eventually accept Nico's invitation, and then they meet at a diner where Nico takes him out there. This is a pretty bad mission to me. It's a weird one because it's like a two-parter where you first have the thing where you're like swiping right on the dude and you go to the internet cafe to get that, and then like a couple days later you have to go back to the internet cafe to kind of accept it and then set up the date, and then you have a third part where you're gonna have to actually go to the diner and then take him out there. It's just a really weird mission, and you have like it in between all these other missions that are actually good and interesting. And it's just like, I don't know, I don't really think it's a great mission, and it's just weird to have this mission with Tom Rivas that just doesn't mean anything in the general aspect of the game. It's just a generic assassination mission, so this one has to go in F tier. Number 1. Nico meets with Brucey at his garage where Brucey shows him a new car that he and his assistant are working on, but since it isn't working, he has to borrow a friend's car for a race that he's forcing Nico to participate in. Nico then drives Brucey over to his friend's car that they pick up, which is a car that seems to be based on a Porsche. Nico and Brucey then drive over to the start location of the race and easily win the race around Dukes. After Nico wins the race, Brucey wants him to take him home to work out, even though he did nothing during the actual race. And on the way back, Nico kind of asks what Brucey does for a living and why he had all these people that he needed to take out and like kill. And Brucey describes himself as an entrepreneur and says that he wants people dead because of all the steroids he's intaking, and he has these massive mood swings because he's just juicing himself all the time and he's always pumped up on testosterone. And because of this, Nico decides to stop working with him because Brucey is just a little bit off his rocker, but he still decides to be friends with Brucey and says that if he ever wants to hang out, he can just call him up. So it also is kind of fun in that way where you can still be friends with Brucey, but you're not going to work for him anymore. Brucey also gives the Porsche looking car to Nico as a gift for winning the race and tells him that he can call anytime to do races with him as well. The race was surprisingly easy. I feel like Rockstar missions usually have some like the weirdest races where you just have this rubber banding behind you, but here there was no rubber banding, and I think the mission itself does a good job of showing Brucey as a character, someone who lets his feelings take over and do whatever they want and just kind of like goes with the flow in that sense. So it is a solid mission, but I do just think it's like not really that interesting, and the race is just not good. The Puerto Rican connection. Nico meets Manny Escuela and his cameraman in the community center where they're reviewing one of their clips on television, and Manny says that it makes him look gay. Manny then tells Nico to eliminate some of his former friends who have been talking all kinds of shit on him. He reveals that they will be riding the L train from Algonquin to Dukes and then to take them out after they get off the train. Nico then has to follow the train in a car where you're like driving around the city and the train is going one way and you have to follow it throughout the streets, which actually is pretty nice, and then go to the platform after the train stops and eliminate the targets after they get off the train. The chase of like getting and following the train is actually really interesting, but I feel like the shootout in the mission itself doesn't really mean much. Like Manny doesn't really say a ton, and it's just like a basic assassination. I just wish this chase was used in another mission instead of this one, because it's not really used for anything in this one. There's not really that much like lore behind it, and I just think the chase itself is like a really interesting set piece that could have been cool if there was a tense mission behind it, but it's using this mission that just isn't all that interesting. It doesn't really mean that much to the plot of the game, so it's kind of just a weak mission because of that. Deconstruction for beginners. Nico meets Playboy X at his penthouse where Playboy shows Nico around his terrace. One of the girls in the house then says that Dwayne Forge is here, and Playboy realizes that Dwayne must have been just released from prison. Dwayne then shows up and Playboy greets him saying that he didn't tell him that he was getting out, and Dwayne then says he called Playboy multiple times, but Playboy just didn't pick up because Playboy's too much of a big time guy at this point. So you can clearly see that there's some sort of a conflict here in between the two of them, where Dwayne isn't really getting the same amount of love that he got from Playboy when he was at the top and when Playboy was at the bottom. Nico and Playboy then head over to a construction site in Algonquin where Playboy says that he wants Yusuf Amir, who is a real estate developer, to work with him, as Playboy is really interested in real estate, but Amir has completely ignored him so far. Playboy thinks that a nice gesture for Amir will kind of turn his luck around and show that he actually has influence in Liberty City, so he asks Nico to eliminate the Union goons who are stopping the construction on Amir's property. Nico first has to snipe the lookouts at the site from a nearby building. Each of the 3 lookouts is perched on a construction crane, and after getting sniped, they will each have a unique death scene. One of the lookouts just shoots his assault rifle, one lands on a parked car, breaking the windows, and one just splats on the ground. Nico is then forced to fight his way through the construction site to eliminate 4 Union leaders on the site. There are like little small sequences for each of the Union leaders where they gear up with more men, basically say that you can't get them before Nico shoots them, except for the 4th Union leader who tries to first escape in a helicopter before Nico takes him out. This is a good mission because you have this introduction fully to Playboy X and Dwayne and their dynamic, and the shootout in the construction site is solid, but I do think like the shooting of the lookouts and each of the guys on the top of the tower and then them splatting down with their own little cutscene is probably the coolest part of the mission, as you can see them like flop on the ground. But it's not really all that interesting as a mission because it doesn't really like contribute to the overall story. But I really like the setting of the construction site for the shootout, and I do think that works well, but I just wish it was a little bit more involved with the actual plot. The snowstorm. Nico goes to Elizabeta's apartment where she's arguing with Lil Jacob, saying that Jacob introduced her to someone who stole her coke, so she tells Nico that he has to get her coke back. Nico then goes to the old hospital on Colony Island where the coke is being stashed, as 2 gangs are conducting a deal for it. Nico then has to fight his way through both gangs, but eventually will retrieve the coke. When he gets it, Noose agents start to storm the hospital, so Nico has to fight his way out of the hospital and escape the police before meeting up with Little Jacob. Nico meets with Jacob in Bohan, who says that he might know where the heat is coming from, before Michelle shows up and asks for the coke. She reveals that she works for a governmental organization and is an undercover agent who was given the job of spying on Nico. Nico says this is a joke, right? Before Michelle asks again for the coke and says that they can walk free as her employers are interested in using Little Jacob and Nico's services in the future. Michelle then leaves with the coke, and Jacob calls Elizabeta to say that she won't be getting it back. I really like the ideas of the 2 worlds clashing together with Elizabeta and Jacob knowing each other, and then you have the fight in the old hospital, which is pretty solid, having to clear out some guys before Noose comes and tries to get you as well, and then again the mission continuing after that, where it's like, oh, you have to drop it off with Jacob, and then you have this shock that Michelle was actually a secret agent the entire time. It just shows how out of depth Nico has been in Liberty City, with basically people tricking him on all sides and betraying him from all different angles. But this is just overall an amazing mission and has to go into A tier. Have a heart. Nico meets Elizabeta at her apartment where she was freaking out because she knows that she will likely be arrested soon. Manny Escuela knocks on the door, Nico opens it up, and Manny and his cameraman come inside with their camera rolling. Manny tells Elizabeta to stop dealing stuff on his streets before Elizabeta shoots Manny and Jay in the head in quick succession, saying, "I'm not in the mood for this right now," looking at their motionless bodies lying on the floor. Elizabeta then asks Nico to load the bodies in her car and then take it to a doctor in Dukes who harvests organs. Nico then drives over to the doctor, where he tells the doctor that Manny had been trying to help the streets his entire life, and maybe this time he'll actually do it. This is a pretty interesting mission. It's just kind of a weird one because it takes out basically both Elizabeta and Manny as characters, and I don't really think they're the greatest characters in general, but I just think it's a weird way to do it where you kind of take them out in this mission that is not really that interesting outside of that initial cutscene. So I just think in general this is a really weird mission that takes out 2 of these characters that you had at least been working with for a little bit, and just like a weird way to take them both out in the storyline of the game. Photo shoot. Nico meets Playboy at his mansion, where Playboy says that Dwayne has been getting getting on his nerves and tells Nico about the dealer Marlon Bridges, who he thinks has been snitching on him. He asks Nico to eliminate Marlon Bridges and asks Nico to take a photo of Bridges to confirm with Nico, after realizing that that will be easier than describing Bridges and then, Nico maybe taking out the wrong guy. Nico then goes over to where Bridges' location is, and after taking a photo of Bridges, Nico then shoots Bridges and takes him out. I do like the start of the mission showing the tension between Dwayne and Playboy, but this is really just an extremely basic and boring assassination mission and doesn't have any actual plot stakes. Rough Rider. Playboy X offers Nico a job helping his recently released from jail friend Dwayne, who wants Nico to recover stolen money from a man named Javon Simpson. Dwayne explains that Javon ratted him out to the police and is now dating his ex-girlfriend, Charisse. After learning that the rent money that he'd been sending Charisse from prison was actually going to Javon, Dwayne wants the money back. And after realizing that Dwayne kind of reminds him of himself, Nico agrees to help. Nico then heads to an arcade in Chinatown where he finds Charisse and Javon together. Javon then spots Nico, fires a shot, and flees off on a motorcycle after Nico says that he's a friend of Dwayne's. Nico can then choose Charisse's fate, but I spared her and then sped off after Javon, starting a chase sequence where he eventually shoots Javon and retrieves Dwayne's money. Nico then calls Dwayne, who asks to meet him at a clucking bell near Star Junction, where then Nico will arrive to hand over the cash, and Dwayne will ask about Charisse, thanking Nico for saving her as she is an idiot. This is the first mission where you really get to understand Dwayne and talk to him, and Dwayne reminds Nico of himself, someone with a vengeance and nowhere to direct his anger, coming to America with nothing to his name. To me, it's pretty clear that Dwayne would probably also want Charisse alive and not to have Nico shoot her, so it does make sense that Nico would save her, but I do think this is a pretty generic mission, and really all it does is helps you get to know Dwayne, which is nice, but I just feel like Dwayne in general is not like a fully cooked character. I feel like Dwayne and Playboy X are just not fully made out to be these amazing characters. There's not that much going on with them, but Dwayne at least is good in terms of he reminds Nico of himself. Undressed to Kill. Dwayne is still feeling really depressed over his situation, so Nico asks Dwayne what's bothering him. Dwayne mentions a gentleman's club, a place that he used to own, and Nico offers to retake it for him. Nico then heads over to the club in Bohan, where he has to listen into conversations to learn where the managers stay. One manager is in the office, he's counting up money, which makes him pretty easy to take out. Nico then has to take out the two other managers, one which is like a bit of a pain because one is in a back room that's like hard to get into with a guard, and one is in the open, and shooting either will start a gunfight. Then you then have to take out a ton of other people and then get away after clearing out the nightclub. This is another pretty basic assassination mission that doesn't mean that much in the overall story. Going into the club and the general setup of the club is pretty interesting, but after you've played the mission once, it's like you know the exact places where each of these guys are, and it's not really all that interesting, and it is just like a hard mission in a sense where you have this like weird guy in the back alley, which is like kind of hard to take out, and then you have to do this whole fight, and especially with the way that GTA has the missions where it's not like you can restart from a checkpoint, this just does become kind of an annoying mission, so I didn't really like it that much. The Holland Play. Playboy calls Nico and asks for him to meet at his apartment. When Nico arrives, Playboy asks Nico to take out Dwayne. Nico, after first refusing, says that he'll think about it. Afterwards, Nico receives a call from Dwayne asking him to take out Playboy. After another call from Playboy, Nico has to choose to either take out Dwayne or to take out Playboy. Since I went to take out Playboy, this is what happened. Playboy is then surprised after Nico comes back to his apartment extremely soon and realizes that Nico is instead there to take him out. Playboy then readies his bodyguards and has them fight against Nico and then escapes from the balcony. After a short chase on the street, Nico just takes out Playboy on the street, but also you can have a cutscene where Playboy's like trying to bang on a door and then Nico just executes him right then and there. After taking out Playboy, Nico calls Dwayne to inform him, while also adding that Playboy had asked him to take out Dwayne first. While Dwayne is sad that Playboy died, he does offer Nico Playboy's apartment because he doesn't want to use it himself because it would just mean too much about it and it would remind him too much of Playboy. And then Dwayne asks Nico to stay in touch in the future. In this mission, Dwayne and Playboy ask Nico to take the other out, and I think taking out Playboy makes more sense for Nico's story as he sees so much of himself in Dwayne, and it's not like there aren't a ton of other people like Playboy in Liberty City, and it's not like Playboy has a ton of connections that are like still out there doing a lot of other things. Like really the only connection that you meet of Playboy's is Elizabeta Torres, and she's not really that connected because she's probably in jail by this time. So I think it's a pretty interesting mission, and I really like the way you have to choose between these two people, and there's another mission that's very similar to this later on, but I do think this one just makes more more sense for Nico to pick Dwayne just because he seems to connect way more with Dwayne. And it's not like Playboy is like the greatest person and really had like a great connection with Nico. Like I feel like Nico's connection with Dwayne really supersedes the connection with Playboy, and it just doesn't really make sense for him to take out someone that's like so down on their luck like Dwayne, when it's not like he really loses anything by taking out Playboy. Like Playboy is a pretty high roller guy, but it's not like Playboy has so many connections that he can like take out Nico immediately and is going to immediately kill Nico when his goons find out that Playboy has died. Like Playboy isn't really tapped in like that. So this is a great mission, but I just do think this isn't like fully developed enough. It's not really like Nico spends a ton of time with either Playboy or Dwayne by this time, and I just don't really think this is like a great enough of a mission to like really be anything higher than A, but it still is a solid mission. Hostile negotiation. Nico receives a phone call from Mallory, who tells him that she thinks that Roman has been kidnapped and is being held hostage at a warehouse in the industrial park. Nico then drives over to the factory where Roman is being held. Nico enters the factory and immediately takes cover behind a wall near the entrance. He then fights his way through the factory, taking out all of Dimitri's henchmen along the way, before eventually finding Roman on the top floor. When he arrives, he finds Roman being in a chokehold by his captor, who is holding a gun to Roman's head, and then you have to like find a little way to put a bullet in that guy's head without hurting Roman, and Nico takes that kidnapper out. Roman then thanks Nico for saving him, and then they leave the warehouse. Nico drives Roman back to his apartment in South Bohan, and when they arrive at the apartment, Roman admits that he has gambled just a little bit too much, and that is kind of the reason why Dimitri was able to take him, because he had this huge gambling outside debt, and the Lost MC was able to take him at this time and then torture him. Nico also explains that they need to leave Bohan as quickly as possible just because Dimitri knows that they are in Bohan and he can easily find them there. So they do eventually go to Algonquin after this, which is also perfect timing because Nico just got Playboy's new apartment. Although I don't think that Roman can technically go into Playboy's apartment, so they will find a whole new apartment for that. And this mission is pretty solid. I do think the shootout in the warehouse is just a bit generic, but I really love the interactions between Roman and Nico and the contrast between their two attitudes, with Nico saving Roman, but at the same time, Nico is really the one who got Roman into the mess in the first place. Like, yes, Roman is gambling a lot, but it is Nico's people who are the ones who are taking out Roman because of the gambling debts. And the ride over and Dimitri's involvement in the mission, because there's like one part where Dimitri sends a photo of Roman and he's just like beaten up and he's just like, oh, here's your little friend. It's just a great part because you really want to free Roman, and just it makes Dimitri such a hateable character and someone that you want to get rid of even more. Wrong is right. Nico meets Michelle outside of an office building in Algonquin after she had texted him to meet him at that office building. She reveals that her actual name is Karen and that she works for the government, and Nico is pretty upset that Michelle lied to him and doesn't want to look at her face, so Karen apologizes to Nico for betraying his trust and says that he at least was one of the better people that she had gone out with. Karen then introduces Nico to her boss, a government agent who is known as the Contact, before leaving the game for good. The Contact tells Nico to gather information on a man named Oleg Minkov and break into his house and just get information about him. Nico then leaves the building and drives over to Oleg's house in Hove Beach. Nico breaks into the house, but inside it is fully empty, but he finds Minkov's laptop and reads an email from a man named Vasily who tells Minkov to meet him outside a jeweler's shop in Hove Beach. Nico then leaves the house and drives over to the shop, seeing the two men talk to each other, who one of them was waiting outside and the other man pulls up in a car, and they approach each other and they talk about there's a man behind them that's kind of staring at them and he might be potentially spying on them. So after that happens, Minkov realizes that Nico was waiting for him. He starts driving off and you have a little bit of a chase sequence where Nico chases Minkov throughout Broker and Algonquin before eventually taking him out. Nico then calls the Contact to let him know that Minkov is dead. This is a pretty solid mission. You finally get to meet Michelle's true self, Karen, and her work for the government in Liberty City is pretty interesting. I really like the reversal of roles where Nico is a hitman for the opposite side, the government, instead of just working for crime families, even though they are kind of like very similar in the same sense where the government's trying to take out these people who are trying to expose them, and it's very similar to the crime families. The chase is also solid going through Algonquin, but this doesn't really make any sense or like doesn't add to the plot of the overall game so I don't really think it's an amazing mission, but I do think the way it kind of like develops, where you go into this guy's house and then you find something and then you go to that spot and then there you have a chase sequence. Like, it is a pretty solid mission in the way it develops, so overall it's a pretty good mission and it's going to go into B tier. Portrait of a Killer. Nico returns to the United Liberty Paper building in Algonquin and talks to the contact, who tells him that he has to eliminate a Russian owner of an import-export business who is financing terrorist activity in the area. Nico then goes over to a car park in Dukes, where he has to first find a police thing that kind of tells him where to go in Dukes, and there he basically takes out this guy named Dimaev and his goons there. There is really just nothing going on. Like, you do get to have a little bit of a photo of this guy and you do get to put it into the police computer, but there's not really any lore going on with it. There's just not that much going on with this mission. It is just a generic assassination mission. And the other thing about this mission is there's a couple times when I would fail it, and just because of how GTA 4 works, you have to go all the way back to this area, and it's pretty far away from the actual United Liberty Paper Company place, and it just is so annoying to have to go back, especially on a mission that is just so boring like this, and it's just a generic assassination mission. Overall, really do not like this mission, so it's going to go into D tier. Dust Off. The United Liberty Paper contact wants the Russian businessman Eduard Borodin dead, and Borodin only travels through a helicopter, so they first ask Nico to steal a helicopter so that they can outfit it with weapons to eventually take out Borodin in his own helicopter. Nico then has to find a target helicopter that I think is also involved with crime that they can steal, and he has to follow it around Algonquin as it takes off and then goes to this other spot in West Algonquin and then ambush it and take it away. It eventually lands at the docks in Algonquin, then Nico ambushes it, takes down all the guards, and eventually steals the helicopter. Nico then brings the helicopter over to Francis International Airport, where the paper employees say that they will load it up with a rocket launcher and then call Nico. Well, the helicopter ride over the city is extremely fun. I feel like it's very similar to a lot of the missions in Rockstar games, where you have that one mission where you kind of finally go from ground level into the air level. It's like very similar to that one mission in Red Dead Redemption where you go in like the hot air balloon. It just kind of like changes your perspective on the entire game when you go in a helicopter for the first time. I think especially in Liberty City, where it's like you have all these super high-rise buildings, it makes it even more interesting. So it is a great mission in that aspect, but I just don't really like the mission because you have this like weird tailing the helicopter sequence, and it's actually kind of hard to do because it's not like the tailing part is actually hard to do, but once you go and try to steal the helicopter, it's actually kind of like hard to go out and steal the helicopter because you have to like drive your car in, and then all these guys start shooting at you immediately once you get there, and you have to get out of your car and then get into the helicopter, and it's kind of hard to do, and then you have to like redo the mission and have this super boring chase all over again if you do fail it. And I just have a little bit of a personal problem with this mission. This is one of my least favorite ones, but I do think it gives you a new way of looking at the city of Liberty City, contextualizing it from the top of the world. So it is a good mission. I just think it is a little bit annoying if you have to do it multiple times. So it's going to go into B tier. Call and Collect. Nico receives a random text telling him to meet at a pier in South Algonquin, where he eventually is surprised to find that it's Deputy Police Commissioner Francis McCreary. Francis reveals that he knows all about Nico's recent crimes, including the assassination of Faustian. Using this information, Francis then says, "Nico, you have to work with me, and you have to take out all my informants because I'm a very, very corrupt police officer, and I have all these people who are blackmailing me with this evidence of police corruption." Nico then heads to a park along the Humboldt River and calls the blackmailer's phone to pinpoint his location in the crowd. You just call him. He's like, "What's up, bro? I'm here and I need you to give me the money or you're going to get blackmailed." And then Nico sees him. Once the blackmailer realizes he's been spotted, he attempts to flee, but Nico eventually chases him down and shoots him. After recovering the device that the man has, Nico then delivers the evidence back to Francis at a safe house in East Holland. And I do think it's great to have another mission with McCreary in it. I do think the McCrearys are some of the most interesting characters in the game. I feel like they're probably the most characterized people in the entire game besides the Bellics and their whole family. But the mission itself is pretty similar, driving to the lookout spot, assassinating the guy, and then going to give the stuff back to McCreary, which is a bit underwhelming. And I just think in general, kind of all the missions with Francis McCreary are not the greatest in this part in Algonquin. So this one's going to go into C tier. Final interview. McCreary contacts Nico with help for a serious problem of his. A high-profile lawyer named Tom Goldberg is preparing a court case using hard evidence of Francis's police corruption. Oh my god, Francis has even more police corruption. Francis then devises a plan for Nico to infiltrate the law firm of Goldberg, Ligner, and Shyster, which is the law firm that Tom owns. Nico then heads over to an internet cafe and submits a resume that McCreary made for him for an open legal position, waits for a call back. The firm will eventually contact him in the next couple days to schedule an interview the next day, and then Nico has to purchase a nice suit to make him look good and make sure that he can do a good job in his first interview. Nico then arrives at the lawyer company's headquarters and introduces himself to the receptionist, who escorts him directly into Goldberg's office, where Nico then has an interview with Goldberg and eventually just pulls out his weapon and says, "Give me those files back or I'm gonna shoot you." But then Nico also just shoots him after learning the location of the files, which were literally just on the desk right there, which is kind of funny. It's like they were just on the desk there and Nico could have just ran in, stole the files, ran away without taking this guy out. But I do understand maybe there are some copies somewhere. After this, after executing Goldberg, the security is alerted by the gunshots and Nico has to fight his way out of the building, including against police who are also summoned to the scene at the exact same time. And then after escaping out of the area and losing the pursuers, Nico then meets Francis at the police station to deliver the files and close the case and stop any of the police corruption. The banter in this mission between Nico and Francis is great because Nico wants to spend as little time as possible in the police department, and then Francis tries to impart his life lessons on Nico before telling Nico about the target they need to take out. This is probably the best simple assassination mission in the entire game, as you kind of have to find a whole new way out of the building because the first door that you went through is locked when you try to go out of it, and then you also get to hear about all of Goldberg's accomplishments and how he's such a good person. Like, you get to talk to his intern and she's like, wow, he's such a good person. He's helping out kids. He's doing all these things. And he's trying to help out poor people. And then you just shoot him immediately just because you have a very corrupt police officer that is threatening to take you out if you don't take this dude out. So I think it's a pretty great mission and just the best version of like a simple assassination mission that they have a lot in this game. Paper trail. United Liberty Paper Company has finally finished the helicopter and they have added the rocket launcher. So now Edward Borodin, the guy they were trying to take out this entire time with the helicopter, finally is able to be taken down. So they call in Nico and tell him to go to a landing strip in Northwood where he can actually find Lil Jacob is going to be assisting him with shooting down the guy, and he's going to be operating the rocket launcher. So then Nico goes up and flies south and locates the target chopper, but they realize that he's flying over Algonquin, and since the United Liberty Paper guy says not to take out any civilian casualties, they can't take out him over like a huge city because then it maybe crashed into a building. They could take down a building if they shoot it down in the middle of Algonquin and have a lot more civilian deaths. So they can't do that. So Nico has to continue to tail the helicopter until the target is flying over the water before firing at it. Nico then chases the target helicopter until getting to the sea where they can eventually take it down, and he gets close and moves to the right of the target chopper to give Jacob a shot at it, and then they shoot two different rockets. They both miss, and then the third one eventually does hit it, and there's this cool like cinematic execution scene that shows the helicopter on fire and falling into the sea, so clearly the guy has died. It also explodes before this happens, which clearly kills the guy Edward. After this, Nico has to drop off Jacob at the helipad on like pretty close to this area in Algonquin, which also is kind of nice. You get to talk to Jacob, and this really is just a good mission because you get to be with Jacob, who's one of the coolest characters. I really like this mission, and while I've messed it up in the past and had to do the mission over and over and over again, this is the perfect mission to do with Jacob, having an extremely dangerous mission where you're flying in a helicopter with him smoking up in the cabin, which definitely did not help Nico's hand-eye coordination, which he says in the mission. And anytime you're in the helicopter, it's just super cool because you can take in Liberty City from another angle. I think this one is even better than the other mission in the helicopter because this one you get to go through like Star Junction and you get to go over these like huge buildings, which just makes it so much better than the other one where you're just kind of like flying over the water and then you're flying into Broker. And it is just a pretty good set piece that could have been a little bit better if you actually like knew Edward Borodin, but it still works as a way to have like Nico and little Jacob to free themselves from the government. Like the government's not going to be holding this over them anymore. and just in general, it is a really cool mission to do where you have this amazing set piece as well. I just wish you maybe had a little bit more lore behind this guy, but it still is an amazing mission. Harboring a grudge. Nico heads over to Packy McCreary's house where he is introduced to his mother Maureen and younger sister Kate. Packy then gets into a brief argument with his mother over his foul language, and then he and Nico head out to the Algonquin docks. On the way there, Packy explains a job where the triads are smuggling a shipment of illegal meds, and then a guy named Ray Bacino, who's a mobster that Packy works with, has hired them to intercept it. Packy admits that he doesn't really trust Ray, but the payout is too good to pass up, and that the family has kind of fallen down a lot in the past, and they don't really have the ability to pass up something where they're getting paid this much to do it. After arriving at the docks, Nico and Packy have to get up on a nearby warehouse to get a vantage point, where they then watch as a boat pulls in and the triads begin unloading the meds into a waiting truck. After the meds are loaded into the truck, Packy provides cover fire from the roof while Nico climbs down to the ground and launches a full-scale assault on the smugglers, eventually taking them all out. After wiping out the triads outside and clearing out the remaining guards in the warehouse, Nico and Packy then secure the loaded truck. They drive over to Bacino's lockup in Algonquin, and then they are ambushed by heavily armed triad members in pursuing vehicles, and there's a stash of grenades that just somehow is in the truck here, so Nico throws some grenades at these guys, blowing up the cards, and Packy also shoots at them as well, which helps a little bit, but they eventually clear them out, and then the police are on them as well, and then they eventually get away from the police and successfully deliver the truck to the lockup, where Bacino arrives to collect the merchandise. And after checking in with Packy, Ray also takes Nico's phone number to contact him for future work. The conversation between Nico and Packy on the way to the harbor is great, with them busting each other's chops over the cultural differences between America and Europe, and Packy hinting at the fact that his family has fallen a lot in status since their old days. This is a pretty good mission that is carried a lot by just Nico and Packy being together and bantering together. The shootout at the harbor is solid, but it really is nothing special, and the drive away just isn't really all that amazing. It's pretty generic and just not that interesting. Waste not, want not. Nico goes over to the McCreary household, where he is introduced to Gordon and Michael, two associates of the McCreary crime family. The crew is planning to rob a warehouse run by the rival Ancelotti family, and after Gordon aggressively persuades him, Nico eventually agrees to join the heist. During the drive to the waste management facility on Colony Island, Packy outlines the plan. They first are going to storm the front, wipe out the Ancelotti guards, then grab the cash inside, and then finally escape on a getaway boat recommended by Ray Bacino. Upon arriving, the crew fights their way through a heavily guarded junkyard to breach the warehouse doors. Inside, Nico leads the assault against the Ancelottis, clearing out the warehouse floor before fighting his way up to the catwalk to secure the bag of cash from the manager's office. As soon as Nico grabs the money, a rival crew tries to come in and steal the money from them, so they then have to have a little chaotic three-way shootout. Realizing that they're probably going to be overwhelmed, Packy orders Nico to make a run for the water with him, while Gordon and Michael stay behind to hold off the advancing mobsters. Nico and Packy then sprint out the back of the warehouse, diving into the river and swimming to the boat that's waiting for them before speeding off to safety with the stolen cash. The conversation on the way there about the old days and Francis is pretty good, showing how the McCreary's paths diverge, even if they all still are crooked, with the family losing their relevance and Francis going to the police instead. I really like the shootout at the waste management facility, although it is pretty generic, but the boat escape makes the mission a lot more unique. I just think in general it is really nice to have these missions with the McCrearys back to back to back, because it just makes you get more involved in the McCreary crime family story. 3-leaf clover. Nico meets Packy, Michael, and Derek at the McCreary house in Dukes. After a brief introduction to Derek, the group then drives over to the Bank of Liberty branch in Chinatown in Algonquin. They then hold up the bank's employees and keep the visitors as hostages before Michael is shot and killed by one of the hostages, who is then shot multiple times by Packy. Nico then heads down to the vault to get the money from the robbery, and as the gang tries to head outside, they find themselves surrounded by police and noose agents and realize that they have to fight their way out. They find an opening going down alleyways in Chinatown and eventually get spotted by a helicopter, so they're then forced to head into the subway station, where they have to fight off even more noose agents. They eventually start escaping via the subway tracks and make it to an emergency exit, where they eventually get above ground and hop into a car to escape the police presence in the area. Nico then drives Packy and Derek back to the McCreary residence, where Packy mourns Michael's death but congratulates the rest of the group for pulling off the heist, and he gives Nico his share of $250,000. explosives. I really like this heist. It just feels way bigger and more interesting than most missions in the entire game, feeling like this huge set piece that feels like a movie. And the heist itself is pretty fun, and you have to fight your way throughout rounds of the police in Algonquin and then escape through the subway system to finally get out and then go back up above and escape in a car. This mission is just great. It really feels like a movie that you can play, fighting your way through the police to get the cut of the bank robbery that you just committed. It's also great to be fully involved with the McCreary brothers, and Michael's death in the mission is helpful to make it feel like there are at least some real stakes, even if Michael doesn't get a lot of characterization in the game, and he kind of is a faceless character there. Holland Nights. Francis orders Nico to eliminate Clarence Little, who is responsible for some of the dealing and pimping activities in East Holland. Nico at first is a little bit reluctant to do the job, but after getting $5,000 from Francis, he accepts, saying that this is the last job he will do for him. Nico can then go over to the housing projects in East Holland and find Clarence on the second floor. The best way to do this mission is to directly just enter the building and start chasing down Clarence, and as soon as you start trying to attack Clarence's thugs, he will then run to the stairs and stop on the third floor, so you then have to shoot down all of his thugs there and eventually find Clarence, who stops on the rooftop after you take everyone out in front of him. And on the rooftop, Nico has the chance to either spare him or take him out, and I chose to spare Clarence after Clarence begs for his life and says that he'll get out of Liberty City, but I only did this because there is a specific random encounter that I'm going to be making a video about later, and I think you should probably just take the chance to take this guy out here because he's a really bad guy. Nico then has to escape the police, who start to raid the apartment building, and he has to fight them off and then escape the apartment building to get away from them. This mission is great because you get to see how Francis thinks that he and Nico are so similar, even though I know that Nico is disgusted with Francis and how he pretends to be a good guy while being one of the most corrupt people in the entire game. I also chose to save Clarence's life because I do see a way where Nico is kind of like done with Francis at this point and doesn't want to be involved with his schemes that would be done by the police instead, but I do really think that Nico would just take him out at this point because Clarence does seem to be an extremely bad person, but I did it specifically for the random encounter that I wanted to save with Clarence. This mission is solid, even if it's not that unique and just kind of a generic assassination mission, but I really do like the setting in this mission being the projects where you have to kind of like fight your way through the housing projects. Nico goes to the McCreary residence where he meets up with Jerry, and Jerry explains that Don Pegorino wants to spark a war between the Ancelottis and their hired Albanian muscle. The plan starts with assassinating a high-ranking Ancelotti named Tony Black. Nico retrieves a bomb hidden in the alleyway near the McCreary house and heads over to Little Italy, where Tony is meeting with the Albanians. Nico secretly plants the explosive on Tony's car and then waits, and once Tony and another member of the Ancelottis then exits the restaurant and drives off, and Nico has to tail them across the city to an old factory in North Holland. After they arrive and park, Nico then detonates the bomb from a safe distance, taking out Tony in the ensuing explosion. Nico then has to take out the other gang members just so the Ancelottis don't know who actually took them out, and then escape the responding police that come to the area, eventually calling Jerry to confirm that the hit is complete. I really like having this first mission with Jerry, although he's probably the least interesting member of the McCrearys. The following part of the mission is kind of extremely boring, where you're kind of following them around the entire city. I just really hate these following missions, but I do like upping the stakes with the Ancelottis and the McCrearys and seeing the plant blow up. It's not an amazing mission, but it really works well in the context of the story and is pretty interesting as the war is really just starting to heat up. Smackdown. Nico meets a severely intoxicated and incoherent Derek McCreary at a park in Alderney. Derek eventually explains that an old war buddy named Bucky Sligo, who Derek had previously ratted out sending to prison, is now trying to blackmail him and threaten his family. Derek asks Nico to then eliminate him to put an end to this threat. Nico then goes onto a police computer where he then tracks Bucky's whereabouts to a burger shot in Alderney. On the way there, Nico calls Derek, who tells him to use the police car to spook Bucky to fleeing back to his safe house, so then Nico can also take out all of Bucky's friends, who Derek also wants to pay just because he wants to take out all of Bucky's friends for some reason. Nico then arrives at the restaurant and blasts the police siren, causing Bucky to flee away in his truck, and then Nico has to start a chase sequence where he chases him through the streets of Alderney until Bucky eventually goes back to his house, where the rest of his crew is also waiting. Nico storms the house, eliminating Bucky and his entire gang before making his escape from the responding police. Nico then calls to confirm the job is done, where Derek is just slurring his words and clearly is still high. This mission is pretty good because Nico finally gets to have a mission with Derek, with someone who is extremely addicted to drugs and down and out, thinking about the old days instead of what he can do now. The chase of Bucky around town is pretty solid, and I really like the fact that it kind of mixes in some of the lore of Derek with the OK shootout in Alderney. It is a pretty generic mission overall, but I do think it adds in a couple of other things to spice up a more generic assassination mission into something a little bit more unique. Lure. Francis McCreary angrily approaches Nico by the fountain in Castle Gardens, where he reveals that although Clarence Little has met his fate, one of Little's gang members is also threatening to expose McCreary and his corruption. Francis then threatens to expose Nico to the FIB, but Nico says that he won't do anything until he's paid his $5,000 fee by Francis to take out this guy. When Francis eventually does say that he'll pay, Nico agrees to take out this guy. Nico then has to get a sniper rifle that Francis stashed in a car and then drive over to the guy's house in East Holland. Upon getting there, Nico will then call Francis and ask for more details about the guy. Nico then climbs onto the roof of the building opposite the guy's apartment. Little's lieutenant is in the apartment watching TV, so there are a couple different ways that you can basically get his attention and then eliminate him. What I did was I shot the cable dish right outside his window, which made the guy approach the malfunctioning TV, which got him into Nico's sight, allowing Nico to eliminate him. I love the initial conversation with Francis because it shows how bad of a person Francis is and how corrupt he is as a person, and how Nico kind of exploits him even while McCreary tries to threaten him by saying he'll put him in jail, because Nico knows he has way more things on Francis than Francis has on him. This is probably the most basic assassination in the entire game, but I do really like the way that there are multiple different ways to complete the mission, which is pretty cool, but it's like there's just no lore to it, and this guy is just like a random guy that is kind of connected to another guy in a different mission. I just wish there was a little bit more connection to some of the other things in the game. A long way to fall. Nico meets Ray at the Drusilla's Italian restaurant in Little Italy, where Ray asks Nico if he's reliable and whether he can be trusted. He then asks him about why he's in this business, where Nico explains that he needs money, he's good at it, and that he's seeking someone. Ray says that he'll help, and in the meantime orders Nico to take out one of his overdue debtors. He tells Nico that he can be found in a housing project and that his name is Teddy Benavides. Nico says that he'll do it if he's paid, so Ray says that he'll pay double. Ray does warn Nico that if he messes up, there will be some more consequences. Nico will then receive a text message from Ray with a picture of Alonzo, who is one of that guy's henchmen. So Nico heads over to the apartment complex and finds Alonzo, coercing Alonzo into revealing Teddy's whereabouts, which is just up in the apartment building. Nico then heads to the 20th floor where the guy is, where two goons will start attacking immediately because he spared Alonzo, who then warned Teddy. After fighting through Teddy's goons, Nico enters Teddy's apartment and eliminates even more goons. Nico then goes into the empty kitchen and then walks back into the corridor before Teddy dashes from the bedroom, slamming the door into Nico's face, fleeing away. Nico chases Teddy all the way up to the roof, where Teddy eventually is trapped. Nico then shoots Teddy, resulting in falling 23 stories down to his death. Once Teddy is dead, Nico reappears outside the projects and calls Ray to inform him that Teddy is gone. This is a pretty solid assassination mission. I do like the way you have to kind of fight your way through the projects, and at the end you do get to see Teddy fall from 23 stories up, which is a pretty good cutscene, but I feel like overall this mission isn't really doing that much. It is just kind of a pretty generic assassination mission, although I do think the ways that they kind of add a couple more things to it, where you have to interrogate the guy at the beginning and then you have to fight your way all the way through this building, do make it a little bit more interesting than some of the other assassination missions. I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle. Nico heads back to the McCreary household, where Gerald wants Nico to chase and assassinate an Ancelotti named Frankie while in disguise as an Albanian gangster to create even more trouble between the two gangs. He reveals a dead Albanian gang member stuffed in his fridge, who Nico is supposed to pretend to be. He then asks Nico to wear the gang member's outfit to pretend to be like him, and Nico also uses that guy's motorcycle to do the job. Nico takes the man's bike and rides over to Star Junction, where Frankie is having a meeting with another Albanian. Frankie has already beaten him up and spots Nico before fleeing on his bike. Nico then chases Garone through the streets before eventually eliminating him. This is just a really boring and easy assassination mission. You just chase this guy down on the motorcycle motorcycle and shoot him, which makes this a very generic mission, but it is kind of nice to keep upping the stakes on the Ancelottis in this war between them, but I just don't really think there's that much going on, so I think in general it's not a great mission. Taking in the trash. Nico meets Ray at Ray's restaurant, where Ray asks Nico to collect diamonds that the members of the Lost MC have hidden in trash bags throughout Algonquin. Nico meets Luca Silvestri and 2 other workers who work for the Pegorinos, and they take over a truck belonging to the sanitation department. Nico assists them with going around and taking up all the diamonds by driving a trash master to various locations where the 2 workers in the back locate the bags containing the diamonds. After eventually getting the bags that contain the diamonds, the crew are chased by members of another crime family who are running around trying to get the diamonds. After escaping from the pursuers, Nico then drives the trash master to a depot in Fish Market where Luca promises to unload the diamonds for Nico, and Nico leaves the depot. There is some great foreshadowing on how using the garbage truck was kind of a terrible idea to take in the diamonds, and how Luca eventually takes the diamonds himself. And I feel like this mission does a great job of tying multiple different plot threads into the one that is the most important in the entire game, which is the diamonds. And the chase with the garbage truck isn't really the greatest. It isn't all that intense, and driving with the truck is just absolutely terrible, but I really do love the plot connections to this mission, but I just don't think it's all that fun of a mission to play, so I don't really think it's a great mission. Meltdown. Nico meets Ray at Drusilla's, where Ray says that they have a problem because Ray doesn't have the diamond, saying that either Nico or Luca ripped Ray off. Ray tells Nico to get the diamonds back, or they'll have an even bigger problem. Nico then heads over to the waterfront district where Luca's car is located. Luca can be overheard discussing a trip to Las Venturas, which means that they clearly stole the diamonds. Nico then confronts Luca and his friends about the missing diamonds, but Luca says that he never took them and claims that he gave them to Ray. Since Nico made Luca mad because he says that he didn't take the diamonds, Luca and his crew race off to tell Ray that it was actually Nico who stole the diamonds. Nico then steals a car and chases them through Star Junction. When they eventually reach Middle Park, Luca then veers off into the park itself and loses control, slamming into the side of the Middle Park fountain. With the car wrecked, Luca and his crew try to escape on foot, where Luca flees into Middle Park, and the rest of his crew hide behind the pillars just outside, waiting to shoot at Nico. Nico then takes out all 3 of Luca's accomplices and eventually goes into the toilets to find Luca, who is hiding in a toilet stall. So Nico has to shoot down each of the locked doors one by one until he finally finds where Luca is at. Luca then attempts to bribe Nico with a cut of the diamonds in return for sparing his life, but Nico then executes him. Nico then calls Ray to find out his job was just to retrieve the diamonds and not actually take out Luca, but Nico brushed it off and then meets Ray again, where he gives back the diamonds. I really like the chase in this mission throughout Liberty City, and while the ending isn't that great for a mission of such importance in the actual game with Nico like taking the diamonds back, I do think it works well, as it makes a lot of sense that Luca would betray Ray just because there's so much money on the line. I do think it really just sets up the next couple missions into a good spot, because it shows that all these people are doing so many important things for these diamonds. They will put their entire life on the line to take the diamonds themselves, so it is just such a hot commodity that basically anyone will risk their lives to get the diamonds. Museum piece. Ray meets Nico at Drusilla's, and they talk in the kitchen after Ray hangs up the phone. Ray yells at Nico for not calling him sooner because he needs to sell the diamonds because they are a hot topic right now. Nico tells Ray that he will only do it if he promises to find Florian Kravik for him, to which Ray reluctantly agrees. He then sends Nico to the Libertonian Museum in Midtown Algonquin to meet up with Johnny, who is a member of Lost MC, who Nico had already met, so that they can then sell the diamonds to Jewish mob representatives, one of them named Isaac. During the deal, Luis, who is one of Gay Tony's associates, ambushes the trade and takes out one of the Jewish mob members. Isaac from the Jewish mob then takes the diamonds while Johnny grabs the money, and then Luis then takes back the diamonds from Isaac, and Nico is forced to shoot his way through Isaac's henchmen to exit the museum empty-handed. After getting out, Nico takes out Isaac's men who are waiting outside, and then has to escape the police who's on the call and trying to stop whoever was stealing the diamonds, and then Nico calls Ray and informs him of what went down in the museum, and then Ray tells Nico to meet him later so then they can deal with Johnny. The cutscene at the beginning is actually really funny because you can go to Ray immediately at the end of the last mission, and just why would Ray be mad if you went to him directly after the last mission? I also really like the fact that both Johnny and Luis are involved in this mission, connecting the main story to the 2 DLCs, which I mean that's kind of the whole point of the DLCs. They're all connected to the diamonds, and the shootout in the museum is pretty good, even if it is just kind of a generic shootout. Overall, overall, it is a really great mission that really just pushes the story forward and raises the stakes a ton. Everyone wants these diamonds. Everyone is willing to backstab people for these diamonds. These diamonds are worth so much money that everyone will do whatever it takes to get the diamonds themselves and to not pay the amount of money. No Way on the subway. Nico meets Ray and Phil Bell, another member of the Pellegrino family, in Drusilla's, where they are arguing since they don't have the diamonds or the money. Ray then orders Nico to deal with the bikers from the Lost MC, so Nico heads off to an alleyway where he confronts 2 of the bikers. The bikers then escape and Nico has to steal a nearby bike to give chase and start a chase sequence. After taking out one of the bikers, the other rides off a bridge going down into the subway line, so Nico has to follow him. The chase then continues on the subway tracks where they swerve between tracks to avoid the oncoming subway trains. The chase continues all the way to Algonquin Bridge before the biker drops off the bridge and Nico shoots him. Nico then phones Ray to inform him of the biker's death. Although I do think it's a bit stupid that you can't shoot one of the bikers until you finally exit the subway sequence here, this is one of the cooler set pieces in the entire game and works really well to use Liberty City's geography for a mission, especially going down into the subway lines. You also go down in the mission where you rob the bank as well. I just think the subway lines are such an interesting place because they kind of feel claustrophobic, and especially when you have the subway trains going around everywhere, it just makes it a very unique setting for a mission, and that's why I think this is one of the better missions in the entire game, even if there isn't that much lore significance or plot significance to this mission. Late checkout. Ray has lost the money and his diamonds and is just getting mad at every single person, and Nico finds him at Drusilla's, furiously arguing with Isaac, the Jewish mob representative, over the phone. Ray then hurls the phone at a waiter and orders Nico to head to the Majestic Hotel to then take Isaac out. Nico can then infiltrate the hotel and works his way up to the penthouse suite by using a window cleaner lift that takes him all the way up to the penthouse through a back method. After fighting his way through the heavily armed crew of bodyguards, Nico can corner Isaac and his associates and just easily execute all of them. Nico then heads down and goes out and then escapes the police, and after escaping the police, Nico then contacts Ray to inform him that the job is done and says that he probably won't be doing any more work for Ray just because Ray has such a temper. This is just a generic assassination mission. This is just a generic assassination mission, but I do think the multiple ways that you can complete the mission and the shootout in the hotel are pretty solid. It also does a good job of being an assassination mission that actually connects to the story. It doesn't feel like a boring fetch mission like a lot of the other assassination missions in the game. It's just nice to actually have it connect back to the main story and be a part of this diamond heist where these people stole the diamonds basically, or they stole the money for a little bit, but then they eventually lost the diamonds. So overall, it is a pretty good mission, but it just isn't all that interesting, even though there are a couple of different ways that you can actually deal with this mission. Weekend at Florian's. Ray gives Nico a call with information on Florian Kravik, a man who Nico suspects betrayed his military unit. Nico then calls Roman to help locate Talbot, the man that Ray says knows the location of Florian. Nico and Roman then drive over to Star Junction in Algonquin, and during the ride over, Roman tells Nico that sometimes he plays cards with Talbot, and Roman and Nico then find Talbot on a busy street looking at a canvas because I think he's a street painter. Nico and Roman then talk to Talbot, who says he doesn't know anything about Florian, before Roman says that Talbot is lying because he knows his tell from gambling with him. Talbot is then kind of suggested to be a former lover of Florian's throughout the dialogue with him where he knows this dude's house. Talbot then agrees to provide directions for Nico and Roman to Florian's house, and Nico then drives to Florian's apartment, which is near Middle Park, with Talbot's help. Nico and Roman then confront Florian, who reveals that it wasn't him that betrayed the unit in the war and that it was Darko the entire time, the other guy who is also in the unit that Nico didn't know who actually did it, and that in America he's actually taken on a new identity of Bernie Crane, who is a flamboyant gay man. This is a great mission. I love the fact that Roman is with Nico during this mission and he actually knows Talbot's tells because of the amount of times that Roman has actually gambled with him, and finally meeting Florian/Bernie is one of the best moments in the entire game, as it shows that Nico's anger has overtaken him and he's acting based on a scenario that he's basically made up in his head, that Florian betrayed him back in Europe, even though it seems like Florian is a pretty trustable guy. Bernie is also one of the few characters in the game who has really achieved the American dream, being able to leave his past behind in Europe and assume a new identity and live his new life in America. While the mission itself isn't that great gameplay wise, I think it shows a new dimension to Nico and how he's changed the betrayal in his head to be a much worse thing than it actually was, and it basically is this thing that's kind of taking up his headspace without really affecting any of the other people in the betrayal. Truck hustle. Ray introduces Nico to Phil Bell, another member of the Pegorino family, who asks Nico to steal a truck filled with H from the Triads. Nico heads over to a spot where the truck will be loaded up with the H, and Nico has to start a shootout with the Triad, and after some fighting, one of the Triad goons gets in the truck and starts driving away. Nico then has to run after it and grab onto the moving truck. Nico eventually has to get up to the front of the truck's roof, where he smashes open the passenger window and gets into the truck. The Triad member then tries to shoot Nico with a handgun, while Nico fights back with the gun and manages to turn it around and shoot the Triad guy in the head. Nico then drives to the old mansion, where Nico hands over the truck with the H to one of the other members of the Pegorino family. I do like the climbing through the truck sequence, but overall this is a extremely basic and really not that interesting fetch quest, except for the set piece on the truck where Nico is literally ragdolling around, which is pretty funny. But it is good to finally get introduced to the higher ups in the Pegorino family in Alderney in this mission, and I do think it just kind of sets up a lot of other things. I think the mission that you kind of have that is set up by this mission when you eventually try to sell the H is just a great mission. So that one does help a little bit, and I do just think it sets up a lot of these things in Alderney. Pegorino's pride. Nico goes over to Jimmy Pegorino's house in Alderney, where Jimmy tells Nico that he has set up a meeting with the Pavanos that would help him gain a seat on the commission, which is like the big mafia controller where all the heads of the families have like one spot on the commission, and wants Nico to tag along to protect him with two goons from the Pegorino family, Big Pete and Marco, who also accompany Pegorino at the deal. On the way to the meeting at an abandoned chemical plant, Pegorino reveals to Nico that he will bribe the Pavanos to give the Pegorino family a bigger name, and then Nico is there to really just oversee the deal and insurance in case the deal goes bad, even though he doesn't think it'll go bad because he's literally just giving these guys money. Nico then has to watch over the meet with a rifle, where it turns out to be an ambush, and the Pavanos open fire at Pegorino's party, prompting Nico to have to take them out to protect Pegorino. Pegorino is injured before he can do anything about it, while Big Pete and Marco are just instantly taken out. Upon rescuing Pegorino, the Pavanos escape with the offering, which starts a chase in the industrial park, and they eventually crash, and Nico has to take them out. Getting the offering back, then he goes and drives Pegorino and the offering back to Pegorino's house. The conversation on the ride over is extremely good, and it shows why Pegorino is the boss of Alderney and why his family is one of the power players in Liberty City, because he is one of the smarter characters in the game. The shootout is solid, and then the chase to get the offering back is okay as well. It's something special, and it is kind of generic, but I feel like the overall feeling of this mission and the importance that Pegorino is starting a gang war is the most important thing about this mission. It really feels high stakes, and you can feel the tension in the entire mission, and I just think the conversations with Pegorino in the car are also amazing. Pegorino is a very interesting character and unique character. I think talking to him in the car, you really get to see and like learn a lot about him in just the first mission with him. Babysitting. Nico meets Derek in Alderney, where he reveals he needs to help a Korean contact smuggle a boat full of counterfeit $100 bills into Liberty City. Nico takes Derek in the boat to Kim, who is a Korean criminal that is wanted by the police for counterfeiting money. He also tells Nico about Aiden O'Malley, who is currently in prison, and a guy who, like Bucky, thinks that Derek ratted on him out to the police and wants him dead. Derek and Nico make it to Kim's boat, where Derek tells Kim that he will text him the route that he is to follow in order to avoid the security checks of entering the city, and that he and Nico will protect him and the boat. As Nico and Derek follow Kim into the river, several Albanians arrive in boats and start attacking Kim, trying to steal the counterfeit notes, and Derek and Nico immediately start opening fire on the attackers, easily taking them out. Kim then passes under a bridge where a helicopter starts shooting at them that Nico has to take down using an RPG that is in the boat. Once Nico and Derek have cleared out all the attackers, Nico and Derek then follow Kim until he finally reaches his destination. While the boat mission doesn't really hold that much weight story-wise, besides helping Derek out, it is referenced in another mission where you meet Kim as well. I don't think that mission has that much weight story-wise either, besides connecting back to this one. Using a boat in this mission does make it pretty unique, especially as you have the gunfights happening as you're driving like a chase, but this time it's in the water. We're also introduced to the RPG RPG during this mission, which is nice, but I feel like this mission is kind of held back by having almost no narrative weight and just being a shootout of people trying to steal the money. Hating the haters. Nico arrives at Bernie's apartment after receiving an urgent call from him. Bernie tells Nico that there is a homophobic man who keeps threatening Bernie. Bernie fears going outside now and feels like he's a prisoner in his own home. Nico then decides to help Bernie by confronting this man by luring him out as Bernie does his regular jogging in Middle Park and then drives him to the park. In Middle Park, Bernie jogs along a path while Nico is required to keep a distance behind him to ensure that the homophobe appears and attacks Bernie. As Bernie jogs under the bridge, the homophobe is found to be hiding behind the bridge and hits Bernie in the crotch with a baseball bat. Nico then comes along and wants the man to pick on someone his own size instead, which then forces Nico into a chase where the man starts running away and Nico has to chase him and take him out. Nico then takes out the man and Bernie is so happy that he doesn't have to worry anymore about this homophobe, and then Nico has to drive him over to Perseus. This mission does a good job of showing Nico taking care of Bernie with him taking out the homophobic guy after he attacked Bernie. This mission also just shows that Nico cares more about protecting his friends than falling into the homophobic trap against Bernie, but I just feel like there's not that much going on in this mission besides somewhat building the relationship between Nico and Bernie, which is one of the best relationships in the entire game, but I feel like their relationship itself doesn't really have that much going on in the missions. It really just is built around Nico and his old life in Eastern Europe and how Bernie can actually connect to that. Union Drive. Nico arrives at Bernie's apartment to find him hysterical and on the phone with his love interest, Bryce Dawkins, who is also the lieutenant mayor. After Bernie gets off the phone, he tells Nico that he and Bryce are being blackmailed by someone who knows about their relationship and asks Nico to help get them to stop blackmailing him. Nico and Bernie then head over to the rendezvous point, and on the way, Bernie explains that the people that he and Nico are meeting are representatives of the blackmailers. When they arrive, it is revealed that the group of blackmailers is working with Dmitry Raskolov and plan to take their story to Weasel News. Nico then chases the blackmailers down and eliminates them. This is a pretty solid mission for just being a generic chase and shoot mission. I love the way that this ties back into Dmitry and Nico's story, as Dmitry is the one blackmailing Bryce, and how Nico gets so candid while talking about what a hypocrite Bryce is by being gay and yet saying that homosexuality is evil and shouldn't be in Liberty City under his family values ticket. It just really is a great mission that kind of develops Bernie and Nico's relationship. I think it does a lot better job of this than the last mission does. Tunnel of Death. Nico meets Derek in his park where Derek is high when Nico arrives and tells Nico that he has heard that Aiden O'Malley is finally being transported to the Alderney State Correctional Facility, and since Aiden thinks that Derek is the reason why he's incarcerated, since he thinks that Derek ratted on him, Derek decides this is a good opportunity to get rid of him. Packy then calls Nico to fill him in on his plan, saying that Aiden is heavily guarded by an LCPD escort and tells Nico to get into a truck where he gets into it that has an RPG, and then Packy tells Nico to use the truck to block one end of the Booth tunnel while he blocks the other end. Packy explains that they can't take out Aiden on the spot just because the police will go straight to Derek because they know that Derek likely could have been the person that did it, so they must make it look like a prison break first and then take out Aiden after the fact. Nico then blocks the tunnel and stops the convoy, and Packy comes out from the rear and blocks that way. One of the policemen then gets out and asks Nico to move the truck, and then Nico and Packy start firing on the convoy and eliminate all the cops. Then Nico and Packy steal the police prisoner transport vehicle containing Aiden, and Nico drives the truck to Port Tudor to abandon it as they escape the police. Nico, Packy, and Aiden then change transport to a nearby parked car and drive all the way over to the cliffs in Alderney. Aiden is really happy that he is finally free from the police custody and asks who sent them there to rescue him. Nico and Packy do not reveal who actually wanted to rescue him until they eventually arrive at the cliffs. Once at the cliffs, Packy will eventually reveal that his elder brother Derek set them to free Aiden so that Nico can take him out. Aiden is extremely shocked and says that Derek has always been the rat. Packy then leaves and Nico can shoot Aiden, who then falls into the water as blood gushes into the ocean. Nico then calls Derek to tell him that Aiden is dead. This is a great mission with Packy and Nico stopping the police transport in the tunnel being a great set piece and just a really interesting setting for a shootout. I do feel like the rest of the mission with the police transport and driving it away from the police and then eventually taking out Aiden O'Malley feeling a bit underwhelming, although I do think it is funny that you just kind of fully blindside Aiden O'Malley saying that Derek was the one who actually freed him and that he's free just to die again. But it doesn't really live up to the raid in the tunnel, but I do really feel like it is a great mission because Nico and Packy team up to do a great thing for Derek and just to help out Derek in his life. Blood Brothers. Francis sends Nico a text message telling him to meet at Castle Garden City Park, where Francis pulls up and berates Nico for not letting him know that he has been working with his brother, Derek. Francis explains that Derek intends to talk to a journalist about their family and Francis's corruption, which could put his career in the police force into jeopardy, so Francis orders Nico to take out Derek. Francis is then set to meet Derek at a park in Algonquin to give Nico an opportunity to take out Derek. Later, Derek contacts Nico to tell him about the meeting and voices his fear that Francis also probably wants him dead. He also asks Nico to go to the meeting and take out Francis. Nico then phones Francis, who says he will double Nico's payment before Nico eventually decides to shoot Francis. I love this mission and how you are forced to choose between Francis and Derek, although I do think it is a little bit short for the amount of narrative impact it has, because you have met with both of these brothers, you have spent a lot of time with them, and you have to decide who you want to keep and who you want to die. And I think that Nico would choose to shoot Francis here just because he never liked working with Francis, and he sees Derek as kind of like the worst version of the path he chose, where Derek is just very much strung out and in a really bad spot. Although I don't know if Nico would choose to shoot Derek, just because Derek is a lot easier to take out in this occasion, and Francis actually has some higher up connections that may help Nico out. But I just think in general he would want to take out Francis, because Francis is just such an annoying person, and I just hate going over to his missions because this guy is so needy and has to have all these things done just because he has a little bit of police corruption going on and he can't do it himself. Undertaker. Packy will call Nico and tell him to wear a suit for Francis's funeral, and informs Nico of Jerry's incarceration in the correctional facility. Kate will then call Nico a few minutes later, asking if he will be attending the funeral. Nico then heads over to Suffolk Church for the funeral. After the funeral, when the guests are gathered in front of the church, there are several waves of attacks by Albanian goons, and Nico and Packy have to fight them off and then get into the hearse, starting the drive to the cemetery. Nico heads over to the Colony Island Cemetery, and on the way, one last car of Albanians will pursue them, and Nico then has to take them out while making sure that Francis's body doesn't fall out of the back of the hearse as the Albanians shot open the back of the hearse. They eventually reach the cemetery plot, and the funeral commences with the entire family, with a conversation at the end where Nico tries to comfort Kate, saying that he was at the funeral because he wanted to support their family. This is a great mission for the story, with the whole family coming together to grieve Francis's death, and it's a great foreshadowing to have this mission being shot up by gangsters, as the other side of the coin, the wedding, will be shot up in the exact same way later. Driving the hearse is okay, but the gameplay of the mission is pretty generic for a mission with just shooting the gangsters before they knock out Francis's body. I also do think Kate's involvement in this mission is great, as she's also very important for the wedding mission as well. I do think this mission has a nice contrast with the actual wedding mission as well, because you have the funeral here and then the wedding at the other one. They both take place at the same thing, and they both have a lot of the same things happening, and you know, one of them, no one dies. One of them, someone has already died before the funeral, and then one of them, one dies during the wedding. It's just a really good job of contrasting between the two different missions. I'll take her. Gerald McCreary just got sent back to prison for racketeering offenses, and then he calls Nico and asks that Nico meet him at the prison because he has a plan. Nico then goes to the prison, where Gerald instructs Nico to phone Packy outside, who instructs him to kidnap Gracie Ancelotti, who is the daughter of the Ancelotti family, Dawn. In order to do so, Nico then has to contact Gracie in a response to an advert she placed online where she is advertising her car for sale. Nico then books a viewing and arranges to meet Gracie the following day. Nico arrives at Gracie's house in Alderney and takes the car for a test drive. During the test drive, Gracie flirts with Nico until halfway through the drive, where Nico turns the car around and informs Gracie that he is kidnapping her. Gracie attempts to phone her father, but Nico snatches her phone from her and throws it on the road, breaking it. During the drive to the building where Gracie will be held hostage, Gracie grabs the steering wheel multiple times and attempts to throw Nico off course and try to crash the car so then she can escape, forcing Nico to keep her in the car until eventually Nico just punches Gracie, knocking her unconscious. After reaching the hideout, Gracie is led inside by Gordon and tied up in an upstairs room, where Nico then phones Packy and informs him that Gracie has been transported to the hideout. I really like the part where you kidnap Gracie Ancelotti, how she goes from being all over Nico and trying to get him to crash the car. You can also see Nico's violent side during this mission, as he just knocks her out to stop her from getting them to crash, which does make sense, and I was like expecting him to do it earlier in in the mission, but I do just think it shows how much Nico can just, be violent for no reason. This mission does a great job of setting up the stakes and getting to know the Ancelottis before the actual confrontation with the Ancelottis. Payback. Following the terrible attempt by Pegorino to appease the Pavanos and the Commission with a tribute, Pegorino then tries to exert his revenge on the Pavanos. Pegorino learned that the Pavanos are due to make a cash pickup in Alderney soon, so he wants Nico to hit them hard, interrupting the pickup and then taking out all the Pavanos in the vicinity. Nico then follows a pair of Pavano goons who are in a black car, starting a chase that leads them to the pickup. The Pavano goons eventually recognize that Nico is a member of the Pegorino family, so they attempt to lose him on the way to a car meet. Nico then chases the Pavanos through the streets and alleyways of Alderney and eventually follows them to the car meet. Nico then wipes out all the Pavanos using all of his methods here. I was like throwing RPGs, I was throwing grenades at him. I was doing all these things because you can't just blow up all the cars there, and it does just kind of start a chain reaction where all the cars start blowing up, and it does help to kind of take all these guys out. And during the shootout, the police then join in where Nico has to finish off the Pavanos and then escape the police. I really just don't like this mission. It is just a generic shootout mission at the car dealership after a boring chase through the streets of Alderney, but the shootout itself puts you right next to police, which allows them to shoot you from behind, which really just makes this an annoying mission to complete, as it may take multiple tries because the police are hitting you from behind while you're trying to take out the Pavanos. And there's also just like zero story in this mission besides it being a hit on the Pavanos by the Pegorinos. Catch the wave. Nico meets Phil at a club in Port Tudor, and Phil tells Nico that Russians have smuggled some drugs into the city from Vice City via a boat for the Ancelottis, and they haven't unloaded them yet, so they are going to go out there and take the drugs from the Russians and steal them for themselves. Nico and Phil then get into a truck where they drive over to the docks in Charge Island, and they say that they're going to use the truck to technically go there and pretend like they're going to pick it up because that is the specific truck that is going to be taking the drugs out for the Ancelotti. After they arrive, two Russians are waiting for them and ask Nico and Phil who they are. They both then get out of the truck and start attacking the Russians after the Russians get a little suspicious, thinking that they're not the people that would be giving the drugs to them. Nico and Phil then have to fight their way through the warehouse and eventually steal the boats that are containing everything and take them away to safety. This mission feels extremely similar to the one with Packy earlier in the story where you rob the warehouse and escape with the truck. Just with the added boat chase at the end, it really doesn't do that much for the story except continue the mafia war, this time against the Ancelottis. And overall, it's just a generic mission, stealing more things and continuing to up the stakes, although I do like it just because I think Phil is a pretty interesting character, but it just doesn't really do that much for the plot though, even though it is like a solid enough gunfight. Buoys ahoy. Nico receives a text message from Bernie who says that he has suffered from a panic attack, so Nico goes over to Pier 45 in Algonquin to help him. When Nico gets to Pier 45, Bernie informs Nico that he actually has something very important planned for them, and this business is actually just a fun day. So they get to use Bryce's boat and just go out on the water and just have a fun time together where they don't have to worry about anything. Bernie gets onto the boat with his picnic basket, and Nico takes him over to a lookout spot in the ocean, and where Bernie uses his binoculars to see another boat that has cute guys on it. Nico and Bernie then realize the cute guys are actually Dmitry Raskolov's goons, and they need to run away from the goons. Nico and Bernie then have to chase after the goons' boat, which eventually crashes on a pier near a cemetery, where Nico has to then follow the goons into the cemetery and eliminate them. Nico then gets back to the pier where Bernie is waiting, and Bernie thanks Nico for the help before sailing off. I really do think this is a great mission because it's great to finally have a mission that is supposed to stop Nico from always being so stressed, because he is so stressed in this mission. He's like, all these people are coming after me, I'm in all this bad stuff, and then Bernie's just trying to calm him down for a little bit, especially with Bernie, someone who actually knows Nico from his childhood, and the chase through the water is pretty good, and getting to take out Dimitri's men who are harassing Bernie is super satisfying. But I feel like with this mission there isn't a ton of weight when Nico is doing such insane things in the other mission, and it's mainly used as a way to get to grow Bernie and Nico's friendship, which works well. But we already kind of know that like Bryce is getting blackmailed by Dimitri, and that's kind of like the whole point of that mission, but it does help out that Nico gets to take them out and he just gets to spend some time with Bernie. Entourage. Nico goes to a hospital where he meets Gravelli, who is the leader of the Gambetti family, and is told on his deathbed to meet the politician Bobby Jefferson and escort him over to City Hall. Nico has been given Gambetti's contact by the UL Paper Company, who say that Gambetti is a friend of theirs and could use Nico's skill set. Nico then goes over to meet Secretary Jefferson Jefferson and his entourage at the Grand Easton Terminal, where he gets into the car in the middle of the convoy with Jefferson, and then on the way to City Hall, a series of roadblocks leads the convoy into an ambush by the Russian mafia disguised as construction workers, as Jefferson is going to give a talk on basically getting rid of the Russian mafia and how these are basically some of the most dangerous people. Nico then has to take down all of the Russians and get Mr. Jefferson out of there after the rest of the convoy dies, having to then evade even more of the Russians in cars before finally getting Jefferson back to City Hall. I like this mission. I think the gunfire being trapped like on both sides of the street, especially while taking out Dimitri's friends, made the gunfight a little bit better than a normal mission, but it still felt pretty generic and only having one gunfight and then one car chase scene, while not being all that important to Nico specifically, does just make this mission not really doing all that much. Like, yes, this is an important mission, but it doesn't really add that much to Nico's story, and it's more to meet like Gravelli. And while that is like a cool thing, like it's great to finally meet Gravelli and help out people who are kind of against Dimitri, but you don't really get to know Jefferson much or understand him besides at the end of the mission where he kind of talks a little bit about his life and why he's trying to take out Dimitri and the Russian goons. Trespass. Nico meets up with Phil, where Phil instructs Nico to take out the Ancelotti underboss named Charles Mateo, who is also known as Chubby Charlie, who is hiding in an abandoned sprunk factory in Alderney. Charlie plans to rat the Pegorinos out, and he's going to be flying a chopper out of Alderney into Algonquin to deliver a message to the commission and reveal that the Pegorinos were behind stealing the shipment. Nico then heads over to the sprunk factory with Phil, who takes off so that he can have an alibi and that Nico can deal with it all himself. Nico then enters and massacres all the mafia men in the factory and on its rooftop before eventually reaching a fleeing Charlie at the top of the roof. The helicopter then arrives and allows Charlie to grab onto it after descending a little bit, so he's grabbing onto like the corner of the helicopter, and Nico then chooses to RPG the helicopter after Charlie says that if he just takes out him, then his pilot will still deliver the message to the commission, and after being RPG'd by Nico, the helicopter eventually explodes and crashes down into the open roof of the sprunk factory. This is a pretty solid shootout mission through the abandoned warehouse before getting a cool cutscene of the chopper blowing up in the warehouse, but I do feel like the mission is a little bit underwhelming for a mission that if the Pegorinos really don't do this mission, their entire family will be toast because the Mafia Commission will just take them out and put like a full kill order on all of them. But it is a pretty interesting shootout mission. I do like that part, and like fighting your way through the entire factory is pretty solid. Dining out. Nico meets up with Gravelli at the hospital again, where Gravelli tells Nico about a Korean that moved into the country and is now selling counterfeit money at a discount. He can be found at Mr. Fuchs' rice box in Alderney, so Nico then goes all the way over there. This is the guy that you protected in that mission with Derek and like allowed him to bring in counterfeit bills into the country. Nico then heads into the restaurant where he can talk to the attendant, who tells Nico that Kim isn't here and then tries to attack Nico if Nico tries to go past him. Nico then has to take out all of Kim's goons in the restaurant, and once the goons are eliminated, Nico goes into the manager's office where he threatens him, and the manager says that Kim is actually hiding away in the kitchen. Nico then takes out some more goons heading through the kitchen and runs out onto a fire escape where he sees Kim escaping. Nico then chases Kim and eventually eliminates him in his car. And John Gravelli will eventually call after the mission and say that Nico did an amazing job. This is an extremely generic assassination mission, but I feel like this one is even more annoying due to how far it is from the hospital and how annoying the setup of the Chinese restaurant is with the ability for 2 to 3 people to be shooting at you from up above at a time. It just feels like a mission that should be from much earlier in the game and not like right at the end. I guess I also didn't realize that Kim is the guy that you protect from Derek from earlier in the mission, which does make the mission a little bit more interesting in the grand scheme of the game, but they do somewhat a poor job of communicating this, just because I played both the missions through, and like, yes, you can kind of like understand that there's some background clues, but I just feel like it would have been a little bit easier to be like, oh, I helped you out, Kim, and then now I have to take you out. It's like, I don't know, it's just kind of a weird thing to me. Flatline. Nico meets Jimmy Pegorino at his mansion in Alderney, where Pegorino, who is extremely paranoid, aims a shotgun at Nico, threatening to take him out, but Nico calms him down and tells him to explain what is going on. Pegorino explains that Anthony Alderney, one of Pegorino's guards, is now working with the Alderney State Police and the FIB, who was hired by them to sell out Pegorino in exchange for his freedom. Pegorino reveals that he called him and threatened him, which resulted in Anthony suffering a heart attack. Pegorino then explains that he thought that Anthony died, but now knows that he survived and is being treated at the hospital right down the street. Pegorino wants Nico to take out Anthony, but warns him that Anthony has a lot of police protection there just because of the fact that he's a witness against Pegorino. Nico then heads over to the hospital in Alderney to get rid of Anthony, and Nico can just walk through the reception and get a bunch of hospital scrubs that he can put on, which then he can change into and head over to Anthony's spot, where he can then go into Anthony's little bedside table, where Anthony first thinks that Pegorino is there to take him out, and he's like, "No, I'm so sorry, Pegorino," and then he eventually realizes it's Nico and that he's going to be dying, and then I shot them and then had to fight my way out, because I guess you can technically turn off the life machine and then make him die normally, but I wanted to shoot him because he deserves it. You don't rat ever, and then it also just makes the gunfight easier, because no matter what, you start a gunfight no matter what. So it is a little bit easier to fight against the police officers that are in the hospital when you just start a gunfight yourself. I really like how in this mission Pegorino is getting extremely freaked out. It just reminds me of Faustian from the beginning of the game, turning on everyone he knows. While it's not as generic of an assassination mission, as you can dress up in the nurse's scrubs to get into Anthony's room, it is still a pretty simple mission, and you don't really get to know Anthony that well before you whack him, so it's not like you're whacking a character that you like a lot. It's just kind of like a weird one where I think if Anthony was a little bit bigger of a character in the game, it could have been a really cool mission. To live and die in Alderney. Phil asks Nico to help him collect the H that Phil's nephew Frankie has been guarding and transport it to an even more secure hideout. Nico then drives Phil to the old mansion in Westdyke where they're hiding the H, and Nico, Frankie, and Belle then open up Frankie's garage and get into two separate black cars loaded with the horse. FIB agents and law enforcement then surround the house just as they're about to leave, and Belle calls Frankie an idiot because he let the FIB find out where they were hiding the H. Nico and Frankie then follow Phil on a wild chase throughout Alderney, where they take out tons of different police cars following them and eventually ditch their cars as the Noose agents find them. After taking out the Noose agents, a helicopter appears above them, and Nico has to shoot down the helicopter before they load the H up into a van and escape away from the cops. Nico then drives Phil and Frankie to their spot where they separate and enjoy their cut of the money. This is just a great job to show both Phil and Pegorino's wife talking to each other at the beginning, shows that eventually you have to fight on Pegorino's side against some of the other members of the family, and how there is just some kind of tension between everyone in Pegorino's family. This is also just a great mission. It immediately gets you into a chase with the police that goes around Alderney and is extremely tense and high paced before transitioning into the on the ground shootout against the Noose. It really just feels like a movie scene. I really think this is a very similar mission to the whole bank shootout, even though you kind of have less of a fight than the bank shootout, but it's very similar to that. I do think it is one of these high tension packed set piece missions that Rockstar really wanted to cook up for this mission, and I do just think this one works really well, and I think it's kind of an underrated mission. I don't know if a ton of other people think this is one of the best missions in the entire game, but I do, so I think this one has to go into S tier. Pest control. Ray sends a text message to Nico telling him that Jimmy wants to meet them at his house, where Jimmy is speaking to Phil and Ray. Jimmy explains that he fears someone is undermining his operation and that there might be rats within the organization. Ray tries to convince Jimmy that Phil is untrustworthy, and after both Ray and Phil leave, Jimmy tells Nico that he has to shut someone up. He has to take one of them out, but has not decided who it will be. After the meetup, Jimmy calls Nico and asks him to take out Ray. Ray and his bodyguards are located in East Holland, and when Nico gets there, Jimmy calls again. Jimmy tells Nico that Ray's heading to a chop shop and should be taken out before he gets there. You're supposed to let them go to a gas station and then blow up the gas station, but I just started shooting at them and executed Ray like that because it was a lot quicker. It's also great that GTA 4 allows you to complete the missions in a lot of different ways instead of just sticking to a rigid formula like RDR2 or GTA 5 has. This mission is pretty good. Finally, Pegorino needs to decide between whacking Ray or Phil, and he chooses Ray, who feels like he's been out of the story for a while at this point. Ray also makes more sense to whack, as Phil seems like he's more reliable, but the assassination part is pretty uneventful, as it would have been nice to have an actual cutscene when I was taking them out instead of like taking him down like I did here. And I think even in the one where you take him down in the gas station, yeah, the gas station's cool and it kind of blows up, but it's not as interesting as it would be the ones you got for Faustian or Vlad. She's a keeper. Building off the earlier mission and over the prison phone, Gerald tells Nico in code to move their prisoner Gracie from the safe house to a different safe house in Algonquin because the Ancelottis have finally found where she is and are coming to save her. Nico then has to avoid the pursuers and not let them attack the car because that will take out Gracie, who is in the trunk. After Nico escapes the Ancelottis, he then delivers Gracie to a safe house in Algonquin, and after Nico and Gracie safely arrives, Nico then hands over Gracie to Packy, who says that Kate is looking after his mother and that he can finally watch over Gracie until they do the handoff. This is not really that much of a mission at all. You just drive from a safe house to another safe house to move Gracie, and there's just not that much going on. I just feel like this one is more of a setup mission for the next mission, which is amazing. Diamonds are a girl's best friend. Nico meets Packy and Gracie in a car at the safe house in Northwood. The trio then head over to Charge Island, where they're going to the Sewage Works place, and once there they meet Gay Tony and Luis, who are going to be trading over the diamonds for Gracie. Nico and Packy then offer to give Gracie back to her family in exchange for the diamonds that Luis had stolen earlier. While Gracie is successfully returned to Gay Tony, the deal is then interrupted by Ray Bulgarin, whose men start attacking them and steal the diamonds for a short amount of time. Nico and Packy then have to fight off everyone, fighting their way through the sewage works, taking out all of Bulgarin's men, and after he leaves, eventually confronting an employee of Bulgarin who holds the diamonds hostage. The man is pretty hesitant to give them the diamonds, as he knows that either they'll take him out and take the diamonds from his corpse, or Bulgarin will take him out if he gives them up just normally to them, so he then just throws them onto a passing dump truck out of spite, trusting neither Bulgarin or Nico and Packy to let him live. Packy then shoots him, and they feel bad that they have no ransom and no reward as they head back to Packy's mom's house. This is an amazing mission. I love the fact that all the effort in the entire game has essentially come down to getting the diamonds. So many people have died just to have a chance at these diamonds, and then one of Bulgarin's men just throws the diamonds away. It just kind of reminds me of the whole idea of this story of all these things that Nico do just come down to be nothing at the end of the game. Yes, he's in a better spot by the end of the game. Yes, all these things have happened and changed him as a person, but nothing has really come out of it that has made him super successful after moving to Liberty City. And this mission does a great job of tying together Gay, Tony's, and Luis's stories with Nico, and having Bulgarin surprise Nico and Packy. It's also just a great turn of events, as right when you think you can finally get the diamonds, someone else, the very worst person from Nico's past, comes back to haunt him. Liquidize the assets. Nico meets Gravelli in the hospital for the third time, but he finds the ULPC contact there as well with John. John says that some Russians and the Ancelottis have struck a business deal, and he wants Nico to take out their operation. Nico then drives over to the compound in Alderney, where Nico guns down all the guards and destroys all the vans containing the substances that Gravelli wants to take out. Gravelli will then call Nico once he hops over the fence and tell him two things. John will say he's really happy to have worked with Nico and to have taken out their rivals' operations, and that Nico's target is finally entering the country. Darko will be in America. This is a mission that is pretty extremely generic. There's just not that much going on. This time you have to destroy the vans filled with the substances, which at least makes it a little bit more interesting, but it's just a regular shootout that isn't that interesting, doesn't really hold any plot value. And the fact that it is the one that's right before that special someone, it's just kind of a weird thing to me. I know you can complete all these missions in different orders before it goes to that special someone, but this one, it makes the most sense to be the one right before that special someone, and for this to be before it, it's just not really that great of a mission. That special someone. Nico receives a phone call from the United Liberty paper contact informing him that they have finally located Darko Brevic, who is the third surviving member of Nico's army unit during the Yugoslav War and probably the guy who betrayed the unit, and they are finally bringing him to Liberty City. The contact informs Nico that Darko will be held at the cargo bay of the Francis International Airport, and Nico phones Roman to tell him the news, and Roman asks to come along with Nico just so Nico doesn't go crazy. Nico then collects Roman from Firefly Island, and they drive over to the airport. During the journey, Nico looks back to the day of Darko's betrayal and asks Roman what he's good at, with Roman replying that Nico still has integrity and the power to be good, but that he must learn to forgive once the confrontation with Darko is over. Roman and Nico then arrive at the airport's cargo bay, and at the same time a van containing the ULP agents pulls up, and they throw Darko out of the back of the van and eventually drive off. Nico then angrily confronts Darko, who is handcuffed, and asks why he betrayed the unit. Darko claims that Goran, who is one of the members in the unit who was taken out by Darko, killed Darko's neighbors, and that he betrayed the unit for $1,000 to fund his addiction. Nico is extremely angry by this point and is just so mad that the fact that the unit was betrayed for such a small amount of money, but Darko calls Nico a hypocrite and asks how much he charges to kill someone, which is pretty similar. Like, Darko got $1,000 to take out like 15 people or something like that, and Nico gets like $5,000 for one person, so clearly it's not the same level, but still, it's like Nico takes someone out for $5,000. Darko then challenges Nico to take him out, claiming that Nico would be doing him a favor because he has nothing to look forward to in his life. Roman tells Nico that they should leave, claiming Darko is already suffering from the effects of his actions and doesn't look like he enjoys life too much. Nico then walks away from him and back towards his car. Darko then runs off, and Roman asks Nico to take him over to Brucey's house. When they get in the car, Nico turns off the radio, saying that he doesn't want to listen to the annoying ads and DJs, and during the journey, Roman tells Nico that he did the right thing by sparing Darko. Nico is initially skeptical of his decision. He thinks that it took every bone in his body to stop shooting Darko there, but later agrees that he did the right thing, and after realizing that taking out Darko would really not change the situation or bring Nico the closure he desired, because he's built up this thing in his entire head that Darko would finally give him the closure, but it really just wouldn't. When they eventually arrive at Brucey's house, Roman asks Nico if he wants to come inside, but Nico declines, says that he needs to be alone, and thanks Roman for being with him during this amazing moment. Roman heads inside, and Nico then calls Bernie to tell him that he confronted Darko, but that he felt that sparing Darko was the best thing to do, and Bernie congratulates Nico for this choice, saying that he's proud of Nico for walking away and that both men now have the closure that they desire. This is an absolutely amazing ending to the Darko saga. Darko finally gets shipped into America just for Nico, and when Nico confronts him, he learns that Darko betrayed his friends for just $1,000. This is probably the best mission in the entire game because it forces Nico to confront his own humanity. His entire life changed after Darko and his friends massacred the village, but Nico has just ended up being as bad of a person as Darko in the US, taking $5,000 to whack someone in Liberty City. Although Nico might have had better reasons for shooting someone than Darko had for massacring the entire village, Darko allows Nico to confront his mistakes and start moving past them, stopping being just this contract killer that he's been the entire game, and instead try to settle down and move away from this life of organized crime. I chose for Nico not to shoot Darko just because Nico realizes that shooting Darko won't change anything and that the massacre happened years ago, yet it is only affecting Nico's life, while everyone, even Darko, has moved past it. Although I do think Nico in the actual game, he probably would shoot Darko just because he can't control his emotions by this point, but I just wanted to do this because I feel like you get a better overall story for Nico. And while shooting Darko could help him process the trauma won't ever go away as his friends died there and won't ever come back. Darko is already a pathetic man who is living with the consequences from betraying the village, as he was brought by the government all the way to America just for Nico. Nico at least has some sort of a life that he can move on to and move past the massacre, and it's not like shooting Darko will get him any closer to that. I also just think this is the best choice for Nico because Roman is there, and Roman doesn't want Nico to take revenge, and Roman is the one kind of living the American dream in the family, and it is because he hasn't let his past control his life. So I think that Nico would want to let Darko live, to at least try to live a life without being focused on the past trauma, and I just feel like this gives him the best ending. One last thing. Pegorino calls Nico and tells him that he needs to talk to him. Pegorino asks Nico to meet him at the club in Alderney. When Nico eventually gets over to the club, Pegorino explains that he is ordering Nico to do an H deal with Dmitry Rascalov. Nico is pretty reluctant to work with Dmitry again just because Dmitry did betray Nico and also kidnapped his cousin, but Pegorino doesn't really know about any of these things, so he orders Nico to meet up with Phil Bell at his apartment to help him if he wants to avoid Dimitri's men going after him, which Nico then does agree to. Nico then leaves the club and phones Roman to tell him about the situation, and Roman tells Nico that he knows all about the deal and also knows where Dmitry is. Nico realizes that he can now take out Dmitry and forget about the deal. Roman kind of begs against this and says that Nico should leave his life of violence behind and do the deal, with Roman planning to use the money to pay for his and Mallory's honeymoon and then also buy a private jet to take he and Nico to Vice City for the little, maybe like the bachelor's trip. Nico then calls Kate McCreary, who tells Nico not to do the deal as she doesn't think Nico should sacrifice his principles for the money or take his chances with Dimitri. This is the decision that you get where you either get to take the deal or get revenge on Dimitri, and I think at this point Kate would kind of convince Nico to get revenge on Dimitri, as unlike with Darko, Dimitri is really hurting people right now, and shooting him would take out the general public, and also to take the deal would be going the exact opposite way on Nico's morals, and Dimitri has been shown to be an extremely untrustworthy guy, so why would you take a deal with him? And even Roman's decisions of like, oh, Nico, you're going to get a lot of money from this. It's just like not really what would go with Nico's overall ideas. Like, it's not like Nico does all of these things to make money. Like, yes, he does use money in game, but it's not like he's going to be betraying his morals so much for the money. So I just don't think he would take Dimitri's deal. A dish served cold. Nico decides not to take the deal and instead takes his revenge against Dimitri after finding out from Roman that he is on board the Platypus, the exact same ship that Nico was on when he first got into Liberty City. He then goes over to the Platypus, which is still docked in East Hook where Nico disembarked it, and a violent shootout occurs where Nico eliminates every single one of Dimitri's men. Nico eventually corners Dimitri in the ship's cargo hold, where he wounds Dimitri, who then begs for his life and tries to warn Nico that people will be very unhappy if he is taken out. Nico is pretty unconvinced by this because Dimitri is basically almost dead at this point, before eventually shooting Dimitri in the head, taking him out and killing him instantly. Afterwards, Nico says that he should have killed Dimitri a long time ago, and then makes his way out of the cargo hold and onto the ship. He also calls Phil, who says that they can't be talking anymore because he took out Dimitri there. This mission is great, of course. I mean, finishing off Dimitri is amazing. The setting of the mission on the ship is great as well, with both spread out shooting galleries and the many parts where you're kind of forced into these tight quarters. It is just an extremely satisfying mission to finally get your revenge on Dimitri after he has been taunting Nico all game. And while I do think it would have been a little bit nicer to have like a bit longer of a sequence to take out Dimitri, where you're maybe like fighting against him for a longer period of time, I do think this mission does a great job of not just making Dimitri's death part of a shootout, and at least giving the player an extra cutscene and the chance to shoot Dimitri with the finishing blow. Mr. and Mrs. Bellic. Roman calls Nico on the morning of his wedding, claiming that it is the happiest day of his life as he is finally getting married to Mallory. Roman then reminds Nico to wear some nice clothes and be at the church at 10 a.m. Nico then calls Kate and tells her that he took her advice, and tells Nico that she is proud of him for cutting his ties with Dimitri, and tells him to pick her up for the wedding. Nico then meets Kate at her mother's house before driving over to the church in Suffolk. On the way over to the church, Kate reminds Nico that they're going to the church where her brother's funeral took place, then wishes that her brother had been happy in his life and that the right person probably would have done it. Nico then explains that he is ready to give up his criminal lifestyle and finally settle down, implying that Kate is the right person for Nico. Upon questioning this idea, Nico then promises Kate that he will protect her. Nico and Kate then arrive at the church and witness Roman and Mallory get married. Outside, the crowd, cheer and congratulate Roman and Mallory as they exit the church, and there's like Badman and Little Jacob and all of Nico and Roman's friends that they have together. During the celebrations, a black car then arrives across the street from the church, and the rear window rolls down to reveal an enraged Jimmy Pecorino, who says, "You double-crossing immigrant shit," and then starts shooting at the crowd with an assault rifle while aiming at Nico. The car speeds off and is revealed that Kate has been shot by Pecorino and that she is going to be dying. Roman shouts for someone to call an ambulance, but Nico reveals that Kate is already dead by this point. Roman tells Nico that he should not blame himself, but Nico is enraged by this point and he lashes out at Roman and claims that it is his own fault that Kate died. Little Jacob and Roman then try to calm Nico down before telling him to get home. The next morning, Nico wakes up in his apartment in Bohan, saying that he was meant to protect her to himself. A few minutes later, Nico then gets a call from Little Jacob, who explains that he and Roman have finally found some of Pecorino's men in Alderney. The foreshadowing in the conversation with Kate before the wedding is amazing, talking about how the wedding happening at the same place her brother's funeral was at, saying that Nico's old friends aren't just going to let him walk into the sunset, and asking if he'll protect her. It just all does a great job of setting up what exactly happens in this mission, and you have this part where you have this amazing moment for Roman here, and then you also have like it all ruined by the fact that Kate dies there and is really sad. The shooting at the church is also great, having the best moment in Roman's life being ruined by Nico, and Nico also not being able to protect Kate and like move past it. Like, Nico could have had a great life with Kate, but because he had this revenge revenge, he eventually loses his life with Kate and instead has to just be alone like he is normally. It's also an extremely impactful mission as it shows that even if Nico tries to change, his past may come back and haunt him. Out of commission. Nico meets Little Jacob and Roman in Alderney, where they then pursue the mobsters to find Jimmy Pecorino. They then have this extended car chase and dialogue between the three of them about why Nico feels like he needs to do this because he wanted to protect Kate, and because Pecorino did shoot Kate, he needs to take out Pecorino for a reason. They eventually lead them to an abandoned casino in the north of Alderney, with Nico telling Roman and Jacob not to join the fight because he doesn't want to lose anyone else who is important to him. Nico then fights his way into the casino until he finds Pecorino. Pecorino says that if he would have worked for him, things would be better, and Kate's death was Nico's fault. He then runs away and eventually boards a boat after having more of his guards try to take out Nico, who then Nico has to eliminate. Nico then has to chase Pecorino using a dirt bike along the shore and following his boat, and eventually Roman and Jacob arrive in a helicopter, which then Nico has to take a ramp to jump onto it, and then Roman pulls him up into the helicopter. Just an absolutely insane sequence. Once aboard, Nico takes over the controls and flies over Pecorino's boat with Jacob shooting at it. The boat then catches fire, but due to an RPG shot from the boat, the helicopter also catches fire and starts spinning out. Jimmy then manages to escape from the boat at Happiness Island, which is just the Statue of Liberty and like Ellis Island stand in, and run under the Statue of Happiness, while Nico safely lands the burning helicopter and goes after Pecorino. Nico then engages in a gunfight with Pecorino, eventually mortally wounding Pecorino in the process. Nico confronts Pecorino as he slowly starts bleeding to death here. Nico tells him that he knows people in the commission and that they all thought Pecorino was a joke. They never really took him seriously. Nico then turns his back on Pecorino. Pecorino takes this chance to aim his gun at Nico, but before this happens, Nico turns back and shoots Pecorino in the head, killing him. Roman and Jacob then show up and comfort Nico, and Roman says that now their enemies have been beaten so they can start making money freely and living peacefully. And even though Nico does agree, he still just really feels bad at this point because of Kate's death, and Nico, Roman, and Jacob then leave Pecorino's body at the foot of the Statue of Happiness, and that's the end of the game. And this is just an amazing ending to the entire game, having to fight your way through an entire warehouse of people, which is really similar to a lot of the other missions you do for Pecorino, before being forced to leave the warehouse and continuing on the bike chasing Pecorino's boat, and finally going on the helicopter to chase him, with the mission ending on Happiness Island, where basically the entire game starts because you have that shot, the Statue of Happiness, at the very beginning of the game, and you kind of end in the exact same place. This mission does a great job of showing that the entire game hasn't really meant anything. Nico is essentially in the same spot as he was at the start of the game, having to find his way in Liberty City, especially as he probably won't be involved in the crime game anymore. It's the perfect ending for a game like GTA 4, showing that all the death was for nothing, and that, well, Nico may be better off. The hole in his heart hasn't been able to be filled by the money. And here I have the final rankings of all the missions in the entire game. These aren't ranked in the actual tiers themselves except for S tier, and here are the 3 F tier missions in GTA 4. Now we move over to all the D tier missions, which there are a lot of. Going over, here are now the C tier missions. Now we move over to all of the B tier missions, going over to the A tier missions. And now here are the top 10 missions in the entire game, all of the S tier missions. In 10th place, I have Blood Brothers. 9th place, I have A Dish Served Cold. 8th place, I have Out of Commission. 7th place, I have Uncle Vlad. 6th place, I have To Live and Die in Alderney. 5th place, I have 3-Leaf Clover. 4th place, I have Roman Sorrow. 3rd place, I have Mr. and Mrs. Bellick. 2nd place, I have Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend. In 1st place, I have That Special Someone. Thank you guys for watching until the end of this video. I'm going to be making a lot more videos on different games soon, very similar ones to this where I rank all the missions, or ones that are similar to my Red Dead Redemption 2 videos just on different games, which just is a little bit more fun to me. And if you guys did watch this one and want to see more videos like this, like it, and there should be some cool videos popping up right now.